Good evening, all of you. Let's look at this question. Constitutionally guaranteed judicial independence is a prerequisite of democracy. Constitutional guaranteed judicial independence is a prerequisite of democracy. So basically, there are two themes which I need to pick up. Like, this is very important. This is how I look at the question. I first break down the question into themes. First, it says constitutionally guaranteed judicial independence. Second, it says prerequisite of democracy. So first, I need to explain the examiner how the Constitution guarantees the independence, and then why it's a prerequisite. Read the entire statement again. It says constitutionally guaranteed judicial independence is a prerequisite of democracy. Now see how this is how we write this question. You can write this question beautifully by saying that it is the courts, especially Supreme Court, who are the final interpreter of the Constitution. Final interpreter of the Constitution, thereby constitutionally guaranteed independence is ensured through security of tenure, through salary charged from CFI, through conduct cannot be discussed in the court of law, through collegium system having the say in appointment, collegium system having the say in the appointment, and the Supreme Court being given power to frame rules. All these points that we know that guarantee independence to the judiciary, we need to quickly write them at one place. Because the examiner is saying what? Constitutionally guaranteed judicial independence is a prerequisite of democracy. We need to first explain him what are the methods, what are the parameters, by what reason has the judiciary been given constitutionally granted independence, and then we write down this independence. See, I am writing connectors in every sentence, in every theme. When I am changing my theme, I am writing a connector. Connecting link is very important. I'd say that this independence is important. Number one, to uphold fundamental rights. You write down under Article 32, the Supreme Court, and 226, the High Courts through the writ petition can or do uphold any violation of fundamental rights. You give the example of any judgment like Sabrimala case, like Triple Talaq, any judgment that you remember, you write it here as an example. How in a democratic society, fundamental rights are very important, and it is the Supreme Court who upholds or the High Court who upholds. Second, you write down how it upholds rule of law by reducing the discretion of the government. Give example of any act of the government that was struck down by the Supreme Court. Then you write down how Supreme Court has upheld social justice. Any judgment that you remember which has upheld social justice, for example, recognizing transgenders as third genders, for example, upholding economically weaker sections will not come in social justice, but you just write down any such action that you know. For example, in case of social justice, how you can write down the example of how Supreme Court has upheld, yes, the rights of women in Hindu undivided family to have the share in the property of the family. You can write the example of triple talaq. Any example that you remember, that you know, which is ensuring social justice, anything, it's open-ended question, you need to fill it with examples. That is how the Supreme Court plays a very important role in ensuring that democracy can function fully. And that is why you can conclude, that is why it is said that without courts, any democracy is no democracy. Any democracy is no democracy. So again, that is how we attempted this question. To just summarize the questions here, thereby questions were more or less attemptable. For polity, your current affair reading through the newspapers is very important. Broad themes like center-state relations, fiscal federalism, cooperative federalism, specific areas in parliament, powers of presiding officer, case laws connected with social themes like Article 14, Article 19, Article 21, all these case laws, they become very important for your analysis of the examination. That is all that we have. Please do have a look and then just attempt the questions again after we have discussed it here in the discussion.
The question that who are entitled to receive the free legal aid and assess the role of National Legal Services Authority in providing the free legal aid in India. So the introduction to such questions can always be made with respect to a number of the constitutional provisions which have been enshrined for providing the free legal aid, like Article 39A in the Directive Principle of State Policy specifically deals with free legal aid. That means the justice cannot be denied to an individual on grounds of any kind of inability that he may be possessing. Article 14, that is equality before law. Article 21, right to life. Article 22, clause 1. Along with section 304 of Code of Criminal Procedure, also enshrines the idea of free legal aid in the country. Further, this free legal aid in the country, they have also reached a new horizon with the pronouncements made by the Honorable Supreme Court in Hoscott versus State of Maharashtra, in Husainara Khatun versus State of Bihar. In 1987, the Legal Services Authority Act was passed. 1987, the Legal Services Authority was passed, and in pursuance to this act only, this body NALSA, National Legal Services Authority, this body NALSA was the one which was established. The major objectives of NALSA with respect to free legal aid in the country, they can be seen as like it is aimed at creating legal awareness among the masses. Apart from creating legal awareness, on a regular basis, organizing the Lok Adalats in the country. In fact, these Lok Adalats are the institution of primary importance as regards free legal aid in the country is concerned. It also promotes dispute settlement outside the sphere of regular courts, and also provide for compensation to the victims whenever required. Compensations to the victims whenever required. Now, there are certain set of eligibility criteria in order to get the free legal aid from NALSA. Like who are entitled? The persons belonging to SC and ST, women and children. Apart from that, the one who is victim of begar, human trafficking, the one who is a victim of begar or human trafficking, along with being a victim of the begar and human trafficking, the one who is mentally ill, or you can say mentally or physically ill, suffering from any mental and physical disability, a juvenile, or any person, any under trial under the custody of law. So these are certain set of categories which are entitled, or category of people who are entitled to receive the free legal aid under the provisions of NALSA. NALSA over the period of time has played an important role in providing not only the free legal aid but also out of the court settlements. The role it can be seen with respect to introduction of a new helpline 15100 for reporting the issues of domestic violence. Reporting the issues of domestic violence. Along with reporting the issues of domestic violence, it has provided the legal aid to the transgender community, organized Lok Adalats on a regular basis. Lok Adalats on the regular basis. In fact, if we can throw further some more light on this, what we can say, these Lok Adalats, they are based on the principles of mediation, arbitration, conciliation and negotiation. Mediation, arbitration, conciliation and negotiations are the four important pillars of the functioning of Lok Adalat. They are also enjoying their legal sanctity or the statutory recognition under the Legal Services Authority Act of 1987. There is no fee which is prescribed for Lok Adalat for the weaker section over there. Apart from that, all the powers, importance of Lok Adalat can be realized from the fact that all the powers which are vested in the civil courts, they are also vested in the institution of Lok Adalat over there. Whether it is enforcing the attendance of an individual from any part of the world or from any part of the country, and along with that, whether it is taking the evidences in the form of affidavits over there. Now, so all these powers which are vested in the civil courts, they are also vested in the institution of Lok Adalat. Apart from this, they have played an important role in spreading the legal awareness and legal literacy in the country. These efforts of NALSA, they can be seen with respect to the two recent endeavors, like one application that has been developed over there called Legal Services Mobile Application. Legal Services Mobile Application. This app has been specifically designed for enabling the easy access to the common man. Apart from enabling the easy access to the common man in the legal issues, there is a scheme called Disha. This Disha, it is based on the four important pillars over there, namely, first is basically an e-interface. It is an e-interface which helps the people or the litigants at the pre-litigation stage. At the pre-litigation stage, in fact, this e-interface has been named as TeleLaw. This interface, it has been named as TeleLaw. Apart from this, the second important pillar of Disha is Nyaya Mitra. This Nyaya Mitra of Disha, it will provide the details of all the pending cases to the courts. Along with that, the third is Nyaya Bandhu. The third important pillar is Nyaya Bandhu. This Nyaya Bandhu will facilitate the interaction between the lawyers fraternity as well as between the litigants. The fourth important pillar or the fourth important aspect of Disha is this promotion of legal literacy and awareness. Promotion of legal literacy and awareness among the masses. So, based upon this small discussion of ours, we can conclude that this institution of NALSA had played a very important role in not only providing the out-of-court settlements but also facilitating the legal justice or the free legal aid in the country on grounds that the justice cannot be denied to an individual merely because of the economic inability of that individual, because of the physical inability, or because of the mental inability of that individual. Though when the conclusion to such questions are made, of course it should always be accompanied by certain set of you can say challenges which have been noticed with respect to this institution of NALSA, like there are certain set of challenges also which are encountered in the effective free legal aid in the country. First is the limited legal knowledge. Limited legal knowledge, of course, on the demand side, on the side of litigants. On the side of litigants. Then poor remuneration which is provided to the lawyers fraternity. Poor remuneration which is provided to the lawyers fraternity. Poor acceptability among the people, like they cover only 1% of the total legal horizon. It has been in fact an observation which has been made by the Honorable Chief Justice of India. Apart from the limited acceptability over there, there are enforceability issues. Enforceability issues means, despite the fact Lok Adalats are regarded as the institution of primary importance over there, these Lok Adalats are having these pronouncements which are being made by the Lok Adalats having its enforceability issues over there. Now, so overcoming these challenges, of course, is going to usher a new era in providing the free legal aid or ensuring the justice to those weaker section of the society which have been kept marginalized, which have been suffering the atrocities on part of not getting these amenities. So the next question that they have asked over there was with respect to the urban local bodies. It's a simple and a direct question. The states in India, they seem reluctant to empower the urban local bodies, both functionally as well as financially. Here basically they are aiming at the functional as well as the financial challenges of the urban local bodies in the country. There is no doubt in the fact that after the passage of the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act in the year 1992, the state vision has been turned into reality. This is state vision as of democratic decentralization as well as principle of subsidiarity. In fact, these are the core ideas which have been enshrined in the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. Core ideas that have been enshrined means, you see, principle of subsidiarity says what? That majority of the functions shall be given to that tier of the government which is nearest to the people. Nearest to the people means people have direct access to that organ or that tier over there, as well as that organ also is in direct touch with the people. That is what principle of subsidiarity is. So this vision of the state has been turned into reality with the advent of the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, and there is no doubt in the fact that it has acted as an important or a pliant tool for the social empowerment, for the political empowerment of the weaker section of the society who have emerged as the leaders in their specific domains over there. Undoubtedly, it has been a very important social as well as a political transformative policy in the country. But of course, it is, you can say, there are certain set of challenges which are also associated with this institution of urban local bodies in the country, like the functional challenges. The functional challenges, they can be seen as, first, poor autonomy. Poor autonomy. Despite the fact that it has resulted in adding a new part called Part 9A to the Constitution and adding a new schedule called 12th schedule where 18 functions are given to or allocated for these urban local bodies in the country, states have shown their reluctancy in allocating these functions, as well as they are having poor autonomy over those issues. Poor autonomy, or you can say limited autonomy over there. In fact, only few of the states in the country are the one which have devolved all the major functions, all the 18 functions to this third tier bodies. Then apart from that, there are areas of common interest. There are areas of common interest between the state government as well as the urban local bodies, which results in what? Which results in duplication of efforts or no efforts, which results in duplication of efforts or no efforts. Then further, you see, in fact, it is one such observation which has been made by the Second Administrative Reforms Commission also, that there are areas of common interest. In its 6th report, in fact, they have highlighted that there are areas of common interest between the state and the third tier bodies, which results in duplication of efforts or no efforts on that part. It can be seen or it can be manifested in the form of creation of a number of parastatal bodies. These bodies are the one which are also performing the same kind of task which have been entrusted with the urban local bodies. Then DPCs and MPC, District Planning Committee and Metropolitan Planning Committee, in a number of states are the one which are not functional. They are not functional. Along with this DPC and MPC not functioning in a few of the states, they faces structural challenges. And one of the major important structural challenges is coming from lack of staff. These bodies are ill-equipped with the staff and their major reliance is still on the state. Their major reliance is still on the state, and in fact they are not having a permanent cadre of their own. These municipal bodies, they are not having the permanent cadre of their own. Then poor accountability and the transparency. Poor accountability and the transparency. Poor level of awareness. Poor level of awareness among the masses. Of course, it is going to act as a contributing factor to the poor accountability and the transparency over there. Then, along with that, you see there have been excessive of interference on part of the political bosses, as well as on part of the administrative machinery, You see, one of the reasons that can be cited for it is like under 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, there was a provision for providing, though it was an optional provision, for providing the representation to the MP as well as MLA or MLC at the intermediate tier as well as at the district tier. Eventually resulting in what? Eventually resulting in a hindrance that is being offered to the functioning of such institution. So on part of the functional challenges, there are certain set of challenges that we have seen. Then again, on part of the financial challenges. On part of the financial challenges or on part of the finance, these bodies, first of all, these bodies are such bodies which are always in dearth of the finances, or that means they are having poor finances. In fact, for the finances also, their major reliance is on to state or the center government. 75% of their finances for financial needs are the one which are fulfilled by the center or the state. Apart from that, State Finance Commission, which was mandated by the 73rd and the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, they have not been formed on the lines of 73rd and 74th Amendment Act. Here the reference will only be with respect to 74th, since we are dealing with the urban local bodies. They have not been constituted on the lines as it was enshrined in the 74th Amendment Act. Apart from that, these bodies, they have limited taxation power. They have limited taxation power. Then also these charges which have been levied by these bodies, these charges are not, you can say, levied in a manner which are sustainable to their expenditure, Further, you see, there have been a report which has been published by RBI in 2021. This report of RBI of 2021, these are COVID years, that these urban local bodies, they have seen an increase in 70%. Sorry, they have seen an increase by 70% in their functions, whereby such bodies' revenue have declined by 70% over there. How do we say that? You see, there have been number of taxes such as octroi. These taxes, entry taxes, now they have been subsumed in what? They have been subsumed in GST. They used to be one of the primary source of meeting the expenditure by these bodies. Now they are not able, they are only able to meet only 15% of their expenditure from this octroi. Why? Because it has been subsumed over there. Of course, it is compounded by another aspects like poor fiscal devolution. Poor fiscal devolution means from union to state, from state to the urban local bodies. Poor fiscal devolution. Now, such bodies are also facing the challenges with respect to no independent audit mechanism. No independent audit mechanism, like you see, these bodies are the one which are beyond the ambit of CAG audit over there. And the state at times have shown their reluctancy in the audit of such bodies over there. Now, poor maintenance of records. Poor maintenance of records, as well as rampant corruption, etc. are the one which can be seen with respect to the challenges that have been encountered by these urban local bodies. Now, in order to overcome all these challenges, there are certain set of recommendations also which have been made by the Second Administrative Reforms Commission. Second ARC, as of, they have talked about the concept of activity mapping. Activity mapping means clear-cut demarcation of the areas of urban local bodies, so there is no overlapping of areas between the urban local bodies as well as the state government. Ensuring the principle of subsidiarity. Ensuring the principle of subsidiarity in reality. Ensuring the principle of subsidiarity in reality means, you see, that means giving them more autonomy over the subjects that have been given to them by the 74th Amendment Act. Then convergence of various policies. Convergence of various policies, so that there are no duplication which can be seen in the efforts over there. there can be an easy formula which can be devised for the transfer of funds, which can be devised for transfer of funds. Rather, it can be termed as a new fiscal transfer system, a new fiscal transfer system which can be developed to overcome all these challenges over there. At times, private financing can also be encouraged in the urban local bodies. In fact, it is one such idea which has also been highlighted in the one of the recent World Bank report. One of the recent World Bank report of 2022, which has analyzed the functioning of urban local bodies in the country, and they have been of the opinion that by the end of the year 2036, there would be around, you see, this 40% of India's population will be living in the urban centers, and which will require an investment of around 840 billion USD in the next 15 years. In the next 15 years, for what? For creating the sustainable urban centers, for creation of the sustainable urban centers over there. Now, so these are of course certain set of recommendations which can be suggested for the effective functioning of the urban local bodies, so that this apparatus of urban local bodies can be seen or can be taken as an agent of change with respect to changing the vision of the state for democratic decentralization as well as principle of subsidiarity into reality.
Now the next question is on compare and contrast British and Indian approaches to parliamentary sovereignty. Now see, first, parliamentary sovereignty is not a concept that's applicable in India. We follow the model of constitutional sovereignty. Parliament is sovereign in England and it's not sovereign, which means there is no limitation that we have in Indian context, which means there is no limitation that we have in the British context, but we have a limitation in my country. So thereby it's again a very simple question we all have been reading. It's from the topic of comparison of Indian constitution with the other constitution of the world. So last year they asked a question on comparison of election of the President of India with the election of France. Now that could not be prepared by anyone. I've been repeatedly saying this, that this topic cannot be separately prepared. We just need to know our static knowledge, and if something happens in current affairs, then we need to be aware of that. So this is a very simple question, comparison of British sovereignty's concept and my sovereignty's concept. I'll just tell you how to write here. Now in this question, I'd first introduce this question by simply telling about the broad difference. I'd say that the British follow the concept of parliamentary sovereignty, where the powers of the British Parliament are not limited as compared to the Indian Parliament, which has its legislative powers limited. Now we can simply draw a table here and just tabulate. This is again very simple. And you can write a statement. Following is the difference in the approach of sovereignty vis-a-vis the Parliament in British as well as Indian context. So you would first write the indicators now. First, we all know that the powers of the British Parliament, they are unlimited. We know that the powers of the Indian Parliament, they are limited. Right? Second, you would write down that their constitution is unwritten. That further increases the scope of powers of the British Parliament. Here we'll write down, we have a codified, or you can write like this, we have a written constitution we have a written constitution that further restricts the power of the parliament, then you will write that the British, they have a unitary structure or division of powers that facilitates the strength of the British Parliament. Fourth, we'll say the Indian Parliament is limited by federal provisions, as even the legislative powers are shared between the center and the states. The states, they've got separate areas in the constitution in the state list, and the union has got separate areas of legislation in the union list. And then you would say, finally, in the end, that the British laws are not limited by fundamental rights. In India, the laws which are made by the parliament need to be tested upon the floor for the test of fundamental rights. If any law made by the Indian Parliament violates fundamental rights, then that law can be struck down by the courts by the order of judicial review. So again, to repeat, when I'm writing these points, you need to explain them. This is just an idea to how to write answers. When you write, don't say unlimited, limited, explain. Unlimited powers are given because the parliament is sovereign authority and it knows no limitations. In India, the constitution is limiting the power of the parliament, as parliament needs to function within the powers given by the constitution. Second, unwritten further facilitates the powers as it is not codified. Written further reduces as the powers of the parliament have been codified. That is how you need to write 2 lines. If you just make a table like I've made, this is just indicative, this is not exhaustive. You need to write 2 lines a piece in each of these provisions. And with this, again, this was a simple question. We all know these points from our basic static reading. It was again an easy attempt that we could have attempted. A good student would have easily taken this question right. Fifth question is again a very simple question. Discuss the role of presiding officers of state legislatures in maintaining order and impartiality, and in conducting legislative work, and in facilitating best democratic practices. So in this case, you can simply write the intro. It's a very simple question. Last year, they had asked about the role of the chairman, the role of the vice president as a chairman of Council of States. This year, they have spoken about the state legislatures. Again, a very simple question. You first introduce this question by saying that the presiding officers in the Legislative Assembly are Speaker and Deputy Speaker, and in the Legislative Council are Chairman and Deputy Chairman. They play a very important role by the following methods. So they are trying to know first the role that they have in conducting impartial proceedings, and then they are trying to know how best democratic practices have been upheld. So in this case, it's a 10 marker. You can write it like this, or you can first write how impartial attitude is mentioned, how best democratic practices are there. These points are very simple. We all read in the books. You can always write down first that the speaker conducts the proceedings of the house by the rules of the procedure, conventions, laws and constitution. Thereby his powers, they get limited. Second, you can write down all the motions, resolutions and discussions, they are admitted only at his behest, and thereby he ensures that impartiality is maintained. You can then also write about the fact that in case of any member, if he is misbehaving or he is not worthy of exhibiting legislative conduct, then he has got the powers to name that member for suspension. You can also write down the case that in case if any member has to be withdrawn from the house. Let's say a particular member misbehaves repeatedly in the house, then he has been given the powers to issue an order where he can direct that particular member to withdraw from the house. The question is regarding the fact that how he first maintains impartiality and how he is also trying to ensure that the conduct can be organized in an organized manner. So both of these points, all 4 points need to be written. And after we have seen the reason why he acts impartially, then you can write down the best democratic practices. Now there is no hard and fast answer for best democratic practice. We need to think and frame in the whole. For example, I'd say that he upholds democratic practices by ensuring that a chance is given to every legislator to speak. He also upholds the best practices. He also upholds democracy by mediating impartially in the disputes. All of these points you can write down. Mediate basically implies that if 2 or 3 odd members they get entangled in a dispute in the house, then automatically the presiding officer will try to intervene and try to set the house in order. That is how the best democratic practices they are upheld. So broadly, you can write examples also, but in the examination hall, recalling the examples of the state speakers or chairmen of legislative council, that becomes slightly tricky. So even if you write this much of information, 3-4 points here you write and 3-4 points here you write, we'd be able to score well. We can, for example, also write here as a point, as a 5th point, in impartiality, that the Constitution allows the presiding officers to exercise a casting vote. All of these things you can write. It was again a simple question where you could have simply known the importance of presiding officer from the book, and thereby whatever you know for the Speaker of the Lok Sabha or chairman, you could have superimposed that same point for the presiding officers at the level of state. So again, a simple question, 10 marker it was, with good these information, 3-4 points here, 3-4 points here, and you stick to the word limit, you score well.
So the question number 6. The crucial role of the development process has been the inadequate attention paid to human resource development in India. A similar question has also been asked in GS paper 1. Suggest measures that can address this inadequacy. So the question is very simple. This is a 10 marker, so we have to write less points. So first we have to define, we have to say that development definition has now been redefined to include human development along with economic development. Then we can also say India's rank in Human Development Index is very low, mainly because of inadequate attention paid to human development. The first point we can say, there is inadequate resource allocation to education, health, skill development, which directly affect Human Development Index. Schemes related to education, health, skill development have not been effectively implemented and they have not been reaching the last mile. The thing is, they have failed to bring any change in the society. Next, what are the measures to address this inadequacy? The second part of the question. The first thing is, we have to increase the budgetary allocation for health, education and skill development, at least take it to 5% of GDP. We have to coordinate between different ministries in implementation of schemes. For example, Education Ministry should coordinate with Skill Development Ministry. Then we also have to improve focus on vocational education, improving learning outcome process, reducing out-of-pocket expenditure. So we have to be more output oriented. Here. And we have to focus more on vulnerable sections like SC, STs and their human development indicators, because especially in case of this vulnerable section, SC, ST, their human indicators are very low. So you can simply divide the question into 3 parts. Intro, you will write definition of development has got widened. Then India's rank. So this is all your complete introduction. Then your second part of the question, and finally your third part of the question, what can be done. So this is all your third part.
The question number 7 of paper 2, discuss the role of Competition Commission of India in containing the abuse of dominant position by the multinational corporations in India. And then the second part was referred to the recent decisions. Actually, although not required to be written in question, since we are discussing, it would be a good idea to have a very brief overview of what is this all being talked about. Okay. Competition means what? Competition basically means that, let's go to the detailed discussion on this part. Competition, so this is question number 7, paper 2. Competition in the sense that in economic theory we talk about perfect competitive market condition, and more the competition, more is the efficiency, higher is the efficiency in production. Higher efficiency as in the products are relatively reasonably priced, and with higher efficiency in production, there is also more benefits to the consumers. So it's like the ideal situation, the perfect competition or competition that we say, it's a perfect situation. It is good for producers, consumers, all of them, and hence for overall economy. But then it is more in theory. Practically, perfect competition is not likely. Yet there is a relevance of it. Even if we are not under perfect competition but moving closer to that, it is better. For example, at least it will be better to have a situation where consumers are getting not the cheapest price product but cheaper than otherwise, or the producers are also efficient. That is why the economists in policy making say that we should promote we should be promoting the competitive markets or discourage the anti-competitive practices. Remember, this question didn't require all this to write, but for your background, I'm discussing all that. Discourage the anti-competitive practices. What kind of practices are we calling anti-competitive practices? Typically, the monopoly situation, when there is a single seller of a product, or the cartel situation, when there are limited number of sellers of a product who manage the market decision making, etc. These are some examples of the anti-competitive practices. How can this come up? How can a particular set of producers can become anti-competitive? For that, in the language of economics, we talk about the terms like combinations. Combinations mean mergers, acquisitions, etc. So it is possible that there are certain firms which merge, or one firm acquire the other firm to behave like a monopolist or to behave like a cartel market situation. That's what we call combination. Or can be, the other term which is very often used is the abuse of dominance. Abuse of dominance just means that if there is a dominant firm, for example, a monopoly or a monopolist, the monopolist can actually abuse his powers to exploit the consumers and exploit the economy overall. So this is the background which I wanted to give in this question. There is a little bit of, this is about economic theoretical background, there is a little bit of history also behind it. In a way, the promotion of competitive practices or discouraging anti-competitive practices started way back in 1950s and 60s itself. More formal was the 1969 MRTP Act, the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Protection Act, or MRTP Act of 1969. This can be regarded as one of the oldest act in which the competition was to be encouraged. But in reality, MRTP became much misused act also. The claim was that in the pre-91 economy, the red tapeism and the bureaucratic misuse of MRTP actually took away the basic goal of it. And that is why for a long time in 1980s itself, etc., it was being thought that MRTP should be replaced by a better act, by a more modern act. And those things became even more commonly discussed after 1991. It was a result of all this that MRTP Act was replaced by the Competition Act in 2002. The MRTP Act was replaced by the Competition Act in 2002. Although the 2002 was the year when it was legislated, its actual working started not before 2009. Okay, so it was from 2009 that its implementation more formally started. With the main role of CCI. That is what the question was upon, the Competition Commission of India. The Competition Commission of India, or CCI, was supposed to play major role in ensuring that the anti-competitive practices like combination, abuse of dominance power can be handled. Okay, so basically by now we have almost 15 years of Competition Commission of India working towards doing all this. Now let's look at the question back again. The question was telling, discuss the role of CCI in containing abuse of dominant position by MNCs in India. The question is not just asking how Competition Commission of India is handling this problem, but also that how is it handling the problem related to the MNCs. Now, even if you are aware of the basics, you will be able to answer this question. The basics as in the older part of discussion. MRTP Act of 1969 didn't had power to handle the combinations among the MNCs, which Competition Act has. So, among many differences between MRTP and Competition Act, one is that the Competition Act, and within that you can say CCI, the Competition Commission of India, who is mainly taking the implementation part, has jurisdiction over the foreign combinations. Foreign combinations as in the mergers and acquisitions where the MNCs are also involved, and conduct of the firms. So, foreign combinations here means where MNCs are involved. The most common case of foreign combination is when a multinational company acquires an Indian company. Okay, like you may have heard of Amazon acquiring the Future Group in the case of retail business. That is one of the cases where the MNCs are involved in foreign combination. First of all, these foreign combinations were outside the purview of MRTP Act. It came in only under CCI. So this itself can be a part of your answer when they say how CCI is containing the abuse of dominant position. Okay, so this is one thing. Secondly, they are also asking to refer to the recent decisions. Okay, now there are two things to be discussed here. Competition Commission was in news recently. And why was it in news? Because there was a Competition Amendment Act that was brought in 2022. So we were expecting a question around that. But this question is surprising in the sense they didn't ask a question on the Amendment Act as such. However, they asked a general question on how CCI is handling it. But when you are writing an answer, One part can be the traditional part, the older part, that since 2009 itself, the foreign combinations or where MNCs are involved, there the Competition Commission of India is active. Then you can also say that this can be one part of your answer, how it is handling it. Then you can also say that with Competition Amendment Act, or basically the bill which was brought in 2022, CCI got more parts to prevent MNCs going for abuse of dominance. Don't miss the keyword of the question. The question is claiming how is it containing abuse of dominant position. So you should be keeping that in mind. So what are some changes which are there in the amendment bill? Some changes are following. One is that the scope of combination has increased. The scope of combinations has been increased. Something which can be under purview of the CCI. Earlier it was up to 2,000 crore rupees. Okay, but now it has been increased with value of above 2,000 crore rupees also. Okay, but remember, this is not talking about MNCs as such. The scope of combinations under the CCI, it is generally that earlier it was up to 2,000 crore, now it is above that. But don't forget that it is in the case of MNCs that we have most of the high value combinations. So most of such high value combinations occur in case of MNCs. So it is not talking about MNCs directly, but indirectly MNCs dominance is going to be handled better by this. Okay, so this also is a point that you can give in the recent part. Then you can say that there are some other initiatives taken in the amendment bill, like hiring more CCI members, who have knowledge and experience in the field of technology. Why this is important? Because most of the dominant MNCs are coming from high technology sectors. Okay, example I'll give you very soon. But most of the dominant position of MNCs are coming from high technology sector, like Google has been a common example therein, or Apple Inc., etc. So that is where again the CCI members must be expert enough to handle such abuse of dominance. Then there is one provision which tells that CCI can impose a penalty of up to 10%. CCI can impose a penalty of up to 10% of a company's average turnover. The company's average turnover in the relevant market. Now, under the amendment bill, this feature was there earlier also, but under the amendment bill, this turnover means global turnover. So can you see how the MNCs are prevented from abusing their dominant position? MNCs are the ones for whom the turnover within India is not only important but global. Turnover means the total sales, basically how much of the goods and services they are selling. There are many companies like Google or Apple, etc., whose global turnover will be many times higher than the turnover in India. So by the earlier Competition Act, if they are being fined also, penalty also, it was 10% of turnover in India. Now when there is 10% of global turnover, this is a bigger fine or penalty, and that discourages the MNCs all the more in abusing the dominant position. So you can give all these examples over there. It was a 10 marks question. You didn't had a lot of scope to write. We discussed it in detail because this was slightly technical question. Remember, there was other part of the question also which was asking the recent decisions of CCI in this regard. The recent decisions of Competition Commission of India in this particular regard. You can give some examples like this. I'm just taking some 2-3 examples basically. You have freedom to talk more about it. Remember, in your example, there must be a case of MNC. Like in May 2019, CCI ordered an antitrust probe against Google. So Google is the MNC that we are talking about. There was an antitrust probe for abusing its dominant position with Android. To block the market rivals. So basically CCI had a problem that some of the Google apps etc. were automatically inbuilt with Android. As most of you know, that in Android phone we have many Google apps automatically there. So the CCI said that you are blocking market rival. Others cannot bring their similar services in the Android due to that. And therefore, recently there was a final ruling coming on that. You must have read in newspapers. In October 2022, there was a fine imposed by CCI. CCI imposed a fine of a significant amount, 1338 crores. Even if you don't remember the number, you can roughly say that more than 1000 crores of the fine was imposed on Google for the same thing, for abusing its dominant position. I think this is the best example of CCI handling the abuse of dominant position being misused by an MNC. You can give some more examples, by the way, like in December 21, CCI refused Amazon's investment in the Future Group company. The Future Group company in India that was being bought by Amazon. CCI had initially given approval, but then later denied, claiming that it may lead to abuse of dominant position by Amazon. So that is where Amazon is another MNC which was prevented from misusing its dominant position. In the same month and year, December 2021, CCI also ordered a probe or an investigation into Apple Inc. or Apple Incorporated business practices. The result is not yet out, but Apple Inc. is another MNC. So I've given you 3 examples. Generally, you won't need more than that, in the sense that this was in any case a 10 marks question. Okay. So this completes the question number 7 of paper 2.
So the next question that they have raised was with respect to the e-governance. E-governance as a critical tool of governance has ushered in effectiveness, transparency and accountability in the governments. What inadequacies have hampered the enhancement of these features? So it's again a simple and direct question. E-governance is defined as use of information and communication technology to bring efficiency, accountability as well as transparency in the delivery of services. Or it can also be taken as delivery of services at the doorstep over there. So this e-governance, as I said, it is aimed at bringing efficiency, accountability and transparency in the process. How? Providing better services to the citizens, ushering an era of transparency and accountability. Then apart from that, empowerment of people by information. Empowerment of the people by providing them with information. Along with the empowerment, you see, bringing more efficiency into the functioning of government. Bringing more efficiency in the functioning of the government. Then apart from bringing more efficiency in the functioning of government, it also provides an interface of interaction, between the people and the administration. Or you can say between the people and the state. In fact, e-governance also marks the beginning of a neoliberal approach, whereby in the neoliberal approach, the people also have a right to question about the quality, standards of the services that are being provided to them, and also they can exercise a grievance redressal mechanism in case those services are the one or those standards are the one which are not delivered. A few examples or the successful examples of e-governance in the country can be seen in the form of mygov.in. It is one such platform where time and again government is asking the important, the recommendations and the important viewpoints of the citizens on the policy matters. Then PMOPG, Prime Minister Office Public Grievance Portal. Here you can write your issues in the 4,000 words over there and they will be resolved within a span of just 1 month. Then e-Bhasha is another such initiative. Then Khajane, then Bhumi as an important land record management system, then e-District, then e-Mandi. Then apart from the e-Mandi platform over there, then there is this apart from this e-Mandi over there, then we can talk about another initiatives in the form of Pragati, e-Kranti, etc. and multiple other issue also to go in the process. So over the period of time, if we can have if we can see this utility of the e-governance, so what we will see, It revolves around people, process, resources and technology. So it revolves around people, process, resources and technology. And certain other important models of e-governance can be seen in the form of G2C, government to citizen, G2B, government to business, G2G, government to government, and G2E, that is government to employees over there. So this is how you can say a briefer introduction to such kind of questions can be made over here, but the major aspect of this question was with respect to the challenges that have been encountered over there. The major challenges with respect to e-governance can be observed in the form of, first, the poor reach of services or poor reach of e-governance. Poor reach of e-governance because of, you see, if we can have an example, the Digital India, one of the key aspect of the Digital India, one of the important pillar of the Digital India was to bring all the 2.5 lakh panchayats, around 2.5 lakh of the panchayats, under the ambit of what? Under the ambit of Digital India. But unfortunately, due to the limited success of the program like National Optical Fiber Mission, etc. So because of the limited success of such programs, they have failed to make an entry into the rural India. They have failed to make an entry into the rural India. Perhaps digital divide is also acting as an important hindrance. Digital divide means the people in the rural areas, they are not having much of the access to the internet amenities as that of the people in the urban areas. Then interoperability is another important aspect. Interoperability means there are certain set of applications, which are working on one platform, but they are not operating on the other platform. Then complexity. These systems or the governance initiatives, they are highly complex, which are far beyond the reach of a layman over there. Then simplicity is not there. Lack of vernacular languages or lack of vernacular content means these platforms, the e-governance platform, either they are designed in Hindi or they are designed in English. So offers what? A constraint on part of the vernacular dialects of the country. Then cost is also an important factor. Cost is an important factor in the maintenance as well as operation of the e-governance platform. Government is having what? Limited funds. So since government is having limited funds over there, so it is very difficult to maintain as well as operate the e-governance initiatives over there. Then apart from the cost factors, security and privacy are important aspect. Security and privacy, as of you see, recently we have seen an attack on AIMS data. It was rather an attack onto the critical information infrastructure. CII is that information infrastructure which, if corrupted or the disruption is offered to the flow of such data, will eventually have an impact on what? National security. In order to take the advantages of the e-governance initiatives, you'll have to submit the data, your information over there. But if that is leaked in the public domain, like take an example of Aadhaar data leak. Aadhaar is your biometric identity, and recently in 2022 there have been reports that data of around 11 lakh of the farmers have been compromised. So they are offering another severe challenges with respect to the security of such, you can say this, not only critical information infrastructure, but other the e-governance initiatives also. Then another issue that can be observed is with respect to resistance to change. Resistance to change on part of the bureaucrats, status quo mentality over there, that they are offering resistance to any kind of innovation. It can be visualized in the form of, you see, majority of the functions, scheme policy of the government, they have not been subjected to the digitalization or the digital platforms in the country over there. So these are, you can say, multiple types of challenges which can be observed with respect to the e-governance initiatives in the country. Of course, with respect to resolution of such issues associated with the e-governance initiative, certain set of reforms can be prescribed as highlighted by second ARC, like first, building a congenial environment. How it is a possibility? It is a possibility by providing the political support to the e-governance initiative at the highest level possible, as well as creating the awareness among the masses. With respect to this congenial environment over there. Now, second recommendation was given with respect to identification of e-governance project. Identification of the e-governance projects as of, you see, this OECD has defined four stages of the e-governance initiatives. They have defined 4 stages of the e-governance initiatives as of, first is information, then is interaction, after information interaction, then is transaction, and eventually it is transformation. Now, thing is, information, interaction, transaction, and transformation. These are the 4 stages which have been suggested by, again, this OECD. In fact, second ARC has also taken a cognizance of this. Then business process re-engineering. In the business process re-engineering, it is aimed at step by step evaluation of the e-governance initiative. Then capacity building and training. How it is a possibility? By the use of the with the support of the civil society organizations. So, if we tend to provide a conclusive remark onto this, we can say that e-governance no doubt has ushered an era of transparency, bringing accountability into the effective functioning of the government over the period of time. And in fact, it has played a key role or an important role in bringing the people near to the government or facilitating the doorstep delivery of the services. But over the period of time, it has encountered certain set of challenges. So in order to provide for the better e-governance initiative, these challenges, they need to be overcome by these certain set of recommendations which can be given for the purpose.
A very interesting word used by UPSC, it says virus of conflict is affecting the functioning of SCO. Okay, and in light of the above statement, point out the role of India in mitigating the problems and that you have to write in 150 words. It was 10 marks question. Okay. Now here, you have to to understand the demand of the question first, you have to identify the keywords. Okay. And the keywords, and you interlink the keywords, that gives you the understanding of how the question's answer can be found. Now, the keyword here is virus of conflict is affecting the functioning of SEO. And in light of the above statement, point out the role of India in mitigating the problems. Okay. So how virus of conflict is affecting the functioning of SEO, that you have to be clearly understood by you. And then based on that, you have to specially focus on the role of India in mitigating the problems. Okay. So I'll first focus on the context, that is conflicts in SEO. Now, SEO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Okay. Now, the conflicts in SEO, you find that this conflict in SEO is interstate conflict, intrastate conflict, as well as the perception of SEO being anti-West. So these are the conflicts which you have to keep in mind, and how India can take steps to mitigate these conflicts. Okay. Now, interstate conflict, obviously this conflict between states of SEO, especially India's problem with Pakistan and China. Now, India is having border dispute with China, and it is for more than 3 months, 3 years, if I'll say, how the Chinese forces have made incursions in eastern Ladakh. And with Pakistan, obviously, we have the legacy disputes also, Kashmir and Siachen, etc. Now, this dispute is obviously hampering the functioning of SEO. But apart from India's problem with Pakistan and China, you have to also understand the border disputes among Central Asian republics, CR, Central Asian republics. For example, Uzbekistan has border dispute with its neighbors, okay, Kyrgyzstan. So here we find that this interstate conflict is affecting the functioning of SEO, and as a normal saying goes, united we stand, divided we fall. So how this conflict among the SEO members is creating problem for effective functioning of SEO. Now this is interstate conflict. Also, the purpose for which SEO was created, to target the 3 problems of separatism, terrorism and extremism. And the roots of it is obviously with Afghanistan. Now, developments in Afghanistan have a ripple effect throughout the region, and that's how it is impacts not only India, but Russia, China, Iran, and the other Central Asian republics. Okay. Now, third is perception of SEO being anti-West, and this is how India has to navigate among this perception that India's foreign policy is based on strategic autonomy. So India is a member of the this regional groupings like SEO as well as Quad, for example. So India has to take steps to change this perception also, and that's where your answer has to be based on how you're going to address these conflicts, or how steps India can take. And the issue which can help us to understand what steps India can take, obviously you can start with the introduction, that since its inception, India as a full member has not only supported strengthening the core agenda of SEO, but also reinforced its commitment to regional connectivity. And India has steadfastly used its diplomatic capital for strengthening cooperation. And that's what India has to do, use its diplomatic capital. And India's steps will revolve around the famous acronym which was coined by Prime Minister Modi in his summit, where he coined the term SECURE, where SECURE stands for security, economic development, connectivity, uniting the people, respect for sovereignty and integrity, as well as environmental protection. Okay. So that's how you have to, your answer will revolve around what steps India can take to ensure SECURE, this term acronym SECURE. Now, starting with the steps which India can take to promote secure. Now, promote dialogue and cooperation. And obviously, India can leverage its diplomacy and especially track to diplomacy. Now, dialogue and cooperation is obviously important because, ultimately, conflict is not a solution to the common problems, and there are this trust deficit which is there between SCO members can be bridged by dialogue and diplomacy. So how India can promote a dialogue which is conducive to conflict resolution, and India can also promote security by strengthening rights. Now this rights, it's a regional anti-terrorism structure that is what was established by SCO. It's an executive committee of the rights, and where through strengthening rights, India can help in SCO managing the conflicts which emerge out of three main problems. In fact, it was for three main problems SCO was established. If you see the SCO charter, it says separatism, extremism and terrorism. And as I said earlier, it has links with Afghanistan. So how? In Afghanistan, you can see the various terrorist groups, they keep on operating, and the involvement of these terrorist groups in illicit drug trade. In fact, if I discuss the latest report of 2021, 80% of heroin in the world was sourced from Afghanistan, and this is how this terrorist activities is also financed. And so terrorism is one common problem which impacts all the countries, including China and Central Asian republics. So how India's diplomacy can strengthen regional cooperation to combat these problems of separatism, extremism and terrorism by curbing the activities of these terror groups, as well as stability in Afghanistan will definitely boost peace in this SCO region and reduce the conflicts. Afghanistan, in fact, is the, I will say, fountain of all these problems, and here we find that India has always emphasized lasting peace in Afghanistan. So Indian diplomacy can go for a regional solution which takes help of the newly entrant countries of SCO like Iran, and with the help of the Central Asian republics, Russia including. And here we find that India has always supported an Afghan-led, Afghan-controlled process. So India can ensure peace in this country by promoting regional initiatives with Iran and other members. So this is how, as far as this, security is concerned, and India can also use its experience of resolving disputes peacefully, and India can leverage its diplomatic capabilities to mediate in disputes, especially among the Central Asian countries. Now, India has been, as far as China is concerned, Pakistan is concerned, India has been emphasizing on dialogue and diplomacy to resolve the disputes. Even with China, India has called for, the precondition is how China should, in a way, abide by all the 5 border pacts which India had with China, that is to boost the trust between the two countries. And India has always called for a diplomatic peaceful solution for its border dispute with Pakistan also. Okay, so how India can use its experience in solving its dispute, for example, with Bangladesh. We had resolved maritime dispute with Bangladesh long back, and that's how it will be helpful in helping these countries, Central Asian countries, to come at this. And India can also, one contributing factor of reducing this conflict is, it is said development is antidote to conflict many a times. And how? By boosting regional economic cooperation, boosting regional trade and connectivity investment, how it will build trust among these countries and reduce the trust deficit. It will promote the development of all the people in this region. So Indian diplomacy can try for boosting trade and investment. And how? especially India's initiatives on digital transformation. Now, this is how India's experience in, for example, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile, which boosts the financial inclusion, and that will be obviously promote development of this region. But what is required for boosting trade and development is boosting connectivity. Now, India has obviously been impeded by Pakistan's refusal to allow it overland access to Afghanistan and then to Central Asia. But still, despite its limitations, India has tried to boost connectivity through projects like INSTC, Chabahar. And that India is making efforts to develop reliable, resilient and diversified supply chains in the region. That is a very important point. So especially after the pandemic had disrupted the supply chains, Indian diplomacy can try to ensure this by boosting connectivity. And India also became member of the Ashgabat Agreement in 2018. So these are India's attempt to boost connectivity. Now, here we find that cultural exchanges, obviously, when you boost people-to-people contacts, that is going to create mutual understanding, mutual tolerance, and a better understanding of each other's culture. And this interaction is what India has been promoting. It's also called as soft power of India, and especially in Central Asian countries and including Russia, we find that India's yoga, Bollywood movies are popular, and tourism is one such very important initiative. How tourism can not only generate employment, but tourism can also foster this people-to-people cooperation. And Indian government has a program called as ITC program. And this Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, by which India, under which India gives scholarship slots, training facilities to the people from this region. And this ITC is an important step to promote capacity building of people in the SCO. So obviously it is aimed towards people-centric development, and that's how it will also reduce conflict in the region. And last but not the least, India obviously has to ensure that this Western perception of the SCO, that how SCO is still perceived by West as the anti-West forum. But India's multi-alignment policy, India is a member of the Quad, India is a member of SCO, India is also joining various other initiatives like IPCT, etc. But at the same time, India has been trying to ensure that SCO is turned into a development-oriented organization in Eurasia. And this, how New Delhi has been stressing, that we have to maintain peace and security on the basis of UN Charter's provisions, and this will ensure collective prosperity of the region. So this way, your steps, whichever steps you suggest, has to be based on SECURE, the acronym, and then you can conclude with the answer that obviously India has advocated win-win cooperation within SCO, which will reduce the impact of the conflicts. And in the answer, you can also mention the challenges, because the challenge for New Delhi going forward is using its substantial diplomatic capital for making the Eurasian region a driver of economic growth and prosperity within ambit of SCO. And Indian diplomacy is obviously geared to meet this challenge, and this will reduce the impact of the virus of conflict. So these are the steps which you can suggest by which India can help in mitigating the problems of this conflict which hamper the functioning of SCO. So this was a question which was based on current ones. The question immediately after this was based on the diaspora. Okay, and if you see, UPSC has been asking questions on diaspora. A couple of times UPSC has asked the question. UPSC has asked the question on diasporas in Southeast Asia. This time UPSC asked the question on diaspora, that what benefits India can get from diaspora in Western countries. So diaspora is an important part of the IR syllabus, and that obviously you have to focus on the diaspora. Let us have a look at the question which was asked this year. And it says, the Indian diaspora has scaled new heights in the West. This statement gives the context or in which the question is asked. And Indian diaspora has scaled new heights in the West. Describe its economic and potential benefits for India. So obviously, what benefit India has by the success of its diaspora in the West? So now it was not Southeast Asia. UPSC asked a question on West. Okay. And if you go into the context of this question which it was asked, context is, if I say, Prime Minister's visit to Australia, where he interacted with Indian diaspora. It was a successful one. He also visited US in June, where he also interacted with the Indian diaspora. So, it has been a policy of Indian government since the last a decade or so, that Indian government has made diaspora an important part of India's soft power diplomacy. And if you see, Indian diaspora has earned a name for itself in the West. When I'm talking about West, it means not only US, Canada, that is North American continent, but also the European continent in particular, and we can include Australia also. Okay, so we can say primarily G7 countries. Now, Indian diaspora has done well in both politics, academia, as well as in business. Okay, the famous Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and many Indian are contributing to this Silicon Valley companies, or many Indians are now the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. In academia, obviously, many Indian intellectuals, if I name Amartya Sen, has made a name for himself. You have Meghnad Desai, you have Lord Bhikkhu Parekh. And if I talk about politics, in fact, in Biden administration, we find Vice President is from Indian origin, Kamala Harris. Rishi Sunak became the Prime Minister of UK. And there was an iconic picture when Prime Minister of India visited Papua New Guinea, where the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, he was photographed touching the feet of Indian Prime Minister when he landed there. So obviously, Indian government has been trying to interact with the diaspora, and this diaspora, the success of the diaspora has now potential, and India has also reaped the benefits, which we can be classified as potential, political and economic benefits. So UPSC asked the question on economic and political benefits. So while answering the question, you have to focus on what political benefits India has reaped, as well as what economic benefits India has reaped, and the further potential for benefits. Okay. Now, in the introduction, you can start Indian diaspora as an important part of India's soft power diplomacy, and India being the most populous country of the world, recently we overtook China. But since 2010, it is said Indian diaspora is largest in the world. And Indian diaspora, if we compare vis-a-vis Chinese, Indian diaspora is comparatively more successful as compared to the Chinese diaspora. So Indian diaspora has been the largest in the world since 2010 and is a powerful resource for Indian government. Okay, and that you can clearly mention in the introduction, and you can see the might of the Indian diaspora is increasingly on display at the high levels of business and apex of the government. Now, coming straight away to the potential benefits, since you have to answer it in 150 words, you can prioritize the points that write some most important political benefits and most important economic benefits. Okay, and here you can see, as far as political benefits is concerned, I have already discussed how Indian diaspora is thrived in the world of politics and the policy making. I mentioned Rishi Sunak, Kamala Harris, or friend Ajay Banga. He is a president of the World Bank. Okay. Now, here we find that Indian diaspora is well established from CEOs to scientists to political operatives to officials. And the first benefit is this provides India unparalleled access to the levers of power in the American system. Second, India's benefit of a liberal democracy that makes Indian diaspora to adjust relatively easily in the liberal democracies of the West, and this diaspora in turn then binds India to the West. And a very good example of this was the Indo-US nuclear deal. When this deal is said to have ended nuclear apartheid against India, and when this deal was being discussed between India and US, there were a lot of non-proliferation hawks in the US administration, which had certain very serious reservations about India being not a member of the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, and still US was making concessions to India. But here the diaspora chipped in, and this diaspora engaged in lobbying and fundraising that helps the push the deal through the Congress, the 123 deal. Okay, so here we find that this diaspora played an important role in ensuring that this nuclear apartheid ended for India, and that was where India tapped into the strength of the diaspora. They helped in lobbying and fundraising. Moreover, this diaspora is a goodwill ambassador to India, and this diaspora's success promotes India's image and benefits the Indian government. Now, diaspora's image, obviously, another I'll say intangible benefit is how when people like Sundar Pichai or Satya Nadella, they achieve success. So, it also inspires the Indians in India that yes, by the dint of the hard work, they can make a name for themselves in the West. Okay, so obviously, if Indian diaspora does well, it obviously adds to India's image. And another benefit is that overseas Indians help limit the damage to India's image due to domestic events. Okay. Now, obviously, due to political reasons, some controversies in India arise. You are well aware of those controversies. So how these controversies do not take away India's efforts at being the largest democracy of the world, India's efforts at promoting inclusive growth. What Indian government says, sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas. So these developments are obviously the negative propaganda are countered by the overseas Indians that it's not what the biased media representation of the West says. And this diaspora also provides a first-hand information to crucial policy decisions. They have act as a crucial input, and how Indian government takes feedback from them, and they provide how Indian government takes steps to address the concerns related to diaspora. For example, if I talk about this H1B visa, so how Indian Prime Minister took the issue with this US government as well as the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Okay, so this is a political benefits. Coming to the economic benefits, as you can say, a recent Harvard study identified that 25 CEOs of the Standard & Poor's 500 companies are of Indian descent. And the economic benefits which India get is obviously in form of remittances and trade and investment. Now remittances, the figure says in India's inward remittance had $108 billion, and a substantial chunk of it comes from the West. And this obviously inward flow has helped balancing the current account. India's exports have declined and India's imports have increased. So we are having this current account deficit. This remittance not only helps India address that issue, but this remittance also furthers in socio-economic development and poverty reduction. So obviously that is an important source of foreign exchange earning for India. First benefit. Second is how it also helps in trade and investment. Now, overseas Indians with contacts, language skills, and know-how boost cross-border trade and investment. They serve as an important bridge to access knowledge, expertise, resources, and they bring technical and domain expertise to Indian startups and often act as angel investors. So, you are aware of the success story of Flipkart. The Sachin Bansal and Benny Bansal, they were ex-Amazon employees, and how they thought of starting a similar startups in India. So how Flipkart became a unicorn. Okay, so this is example of how they bring technical and domain experts. Now, they also finance educational institutions or businesses, and they're a major source of foreign direct investments, outsourcing, and technology transfer. Now, educational institutions, IIT alumni, you must be hearing in newspapers how they contribute millions of dollars to their alma mater, and that is to promote cutting edge research in IITs in India. So how the diaspora wants to give back to its alma mater, and that's how the diaspora contributes in that. They also donate to charities and fund NGOs in the social sector. Now, role of the NGOs in social sector, obviously, that you have to study governance, and NGOs are, especially those engaged in social sector. They are, this monetary help which comes from abroad. It's a crucial, element in their effective functioning, and how they work to uplift for example, millions of people by promoting the SHGs, self-help groups. So that enables their functioning. And this diaspora also pitches in monetarily for the disaster relief. Whenever there is a disaster like what happened in Himachal, or for that matter some years back there was Kerala floods. So how the diaspora pitched in for this disaster relief. That is obviously very timely help provided by the diaspora. And cultural diffusion, how they spread the Indian culture and traditions abroad, and this boosts demand for Indian products abroad. So though this craze for Indian food, diaspora, Indian handicrafts, okay, obviously they create the demands for Indian products, they popularize it in the West, and that's how it boosts exports from India. So these are the economic benefits which India derives from the diaspora. And as I said, that when you can also conclude by saying that what Prime Minister mentioned, the key word, that how diaspora is a living bridge between the India and the host countries, and how this living bridge concept, how this will further nourish India's ties with the host countries. So diaspora you can conclude by that's how diaspora helps India derive political and economic benefits, and how in future obviously that will continue to be an important part of India's soft power policy, and diaspora will continue to occupy an important place in India's foreign policy. You can conclude on a positive note. So this was about the second question, and that's how I have said that this will be relevant in times to come also. That conclusion you can give.
Next question that we have is again interesting. It's like the same strand of question, and it is trying to just confuse us with usage of technical terms. I'll just read out this question. Constitution of India is a living instrument with capabilities of enormous dynamism. It is a constitution made for a progressive society. Illustrate means you need to give examples. Illustrate with special reference to expanding horizons of right to life and personal liberty. Now we all know the textbooks in polity, they are full of the fact that how Supreme Court has expanded the jurisprudence of Article 21 to the fullest possible length. Now the art here is that it is trying to interpret the constitution, but it is not saying the case laws. It is keeping the question open-ended. Now that's the first thing that we were struggled in the examination hall. Constitution of India is a living instrument with capabilities of enormous dynamism. How is the Constitution made dynamic. So it is not only the Supreme Court case laws, there are several other institutions which have made the Supreme Court a dynamic institution. That is what you want to write here. So in this question, now your answer writing skills, they become very important, because you need to now introduce this this question in a very smart manner. So I'd just write it like this. I'd introduce this question in a very simple way. I'd say that it is rightly said that the Constitution is a living document. It is rightly said that the Constitution is a living document, as the legislature, through enactment of laws, and the courts, through enactment of judgments, have given life, have given a spirit to the letter in the Constitution. These terms, if you write, the examiner easily knows that you've understood the framework of question. This question is not on the amendment procedure of the Constitution. This question is not on the case laws. It is just trying to ask us how the framework has got expanded. Framework can get expanded by the laws, by the court judgments, or by any other policy also. If there is new economic policy, it is upholding right to education. Even that's a step which has been launched by the government of the day, and thereby the Constitution is wonderfully expanded. The broader ideas, values, they are coming from here. These values that we find here, they have been given life by the executive, or by the legislature, or by the courts. Now I go to the next point. After I wrote 2-3 lines, I now write it like this, that out of all the articles, it is Article 21 which has been expanded to the fullest. Which has been expanded to the fullest. Which has been expanded to the fullest. And then you now write down in the following manner. You are now coming to the question that how out of all the articles it's 21, and how 21 has been expanded. So I'll write it separately now. Now see the way you have to write this question. This is very interesting. First you say right to food. Right to food. So you would say that Supreme Court has ruled that right to food is one of the rights under Article 21, and the Parliament has enacted National Food Security Act 2013 to ensure that every citizen is able to enjoy his right to food as expanded by the court. There is no need to write the details of beneficiaries, who gets what, that's not required. You just need to tell about the National Food Security Act. Then you need to write down about the right to clean environment. And how you would write here that how the Supreme Court has ruled that it's a part of your Article 21, and how the Parliament has enacted laws like Air Pollution Act 1981, Water Pollution Act 1974. You can also write the example of how this body has been formed by the government, Commission of Air Quality Management in Delhi and NCR regions, to collectively manage the problem of pollution. This is how we are very smartly trying to tell the examiner that this is what has been done by the Supreme Court, and for that competent area, I am also giving a legal enactment. In each of these cases, you know, what actually is happening is the letter of the Constitution that we study, it has been expanded under 21, and that is how the broad values, the broad spirit has become a reality. Again, the recent one, there are so many examples that, you know, we can go on and on subject to the word limit. It's an area where you can fully expand your knowledge. For example, right to privacy. Here you can write the case law. In all these cases, you would not know the case law. How you can write down in right to privacy, that how the Supreme Court has ruled in the K.S. Puttaswamy case 2017 that right to privacy is a part of Article 21, and thereby to further give a legal enactment of that right, recently the Parliament has enacted Digital Personal Data Security Act. This is how we have the case law and the parliamentary enactment. For example, it's not only the center, it's also the states which have gone ahead. For example, there is right to social security. For example, there is right to social security, which is also the part of Article 21, and it's again the state government of Rajasthan which has become the first state to give social security to the gig workers. So you are also trying to show your knowledge. It is nowhere saying only the laws made by the parliament. It is an open-ended question. You have to give examples and throw light into the fact. You can also write down the right to health. Right to health. And again, you can write down Rajasthan has become the first state to give the right to health through the Right to Health Act passed in 2018. There are so many rights that we know. All of these rights you can write down. You can write about right to education is there, right to compensation is there, right to shelter is there. Then you've got right to water. Many things you want to know, you can all write them at one place. Right against handcuffing. That is what you can write in the light of the recent Bharatiya Nagarik Sanhita amendment, which is trying to change the CRPC. How against right to handcuffing, which is a part of Article 21, the Parliament has got this new enactment that replaces CRPC. So in that case, it says that handcuffing shall be used only in exceptional circumstances. So you can write the example of this law that is called as Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita. Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita bill that is trying to ensure that handcuffing is used only in exceptional circumstances. That is the catch here. All of us might have got confused initially, but this question is again a question that is trying to know from us how the framework has got expanded by legislative acts, by executive act, even by the actions of the court. If it has come, you have to now mix and match. In some places, you can give the example of a policy. At some places, you can give the example of a law. In some places, along with what the Supreme Court has said, that is a prerequisite. Like in two cases, I gave the example of the state legislature laws made by one state. If your state has made any law, you can also write that as an example in this dimension. Thereby, this was a slightly tough question, in my opinion, to attempt, because you had to collect many facts at one place. But as a question, I'd say this was a very good question. This was that question where you could have read the newspapers well and amalgamated your points and taken that extra 2-3 marks further ahead with your competitors. Then we move on to the next question. This is also a recent strand of questions that they have been asking in the exam. It's actually significantly coming up since last year, where they want to know about the constitutional dimension of a topic, and then they also want you to substantiate that particular topic with the case law, which is again a good interesting topic, like the question on how GST was accommodating federalism. This also required some good amalgamation of your current affairs knowledge, which you acquire over 1 or 2 years by merely looking at the magazines and not reading newspapers. This would not come to you easily. It will become a hassle. Let's look at this question. Explain the constitutional perspective of gender justice with the help of relevant constitutional provisions and case laws. It's a straight question. So basically it wants to know that how the constitution has addressed the issue of the gender justice in the constitution. So you need to give in the first part different provisions of the constitution where you have the right of women or just gender has been upheld, and in the second part you need to explain the case laws. This case laws requires a bit of your interesting aspects. So I'll tell you some of the case laws that you could write, and some of the case laws that you would have historically known, though it's tough. To attempt this question now, first part is again very simple. We want to write the constitutional perspective. So you can just introduce this question by saying that either you define gender justice in your own words. We do not want a strict definition. We all want to signify and define this term in a simple manner in your own words, just like the NCERT does. There is no need to use complex keywords. Either you define the term gender justice, or you simply start by saying that the Constitution wonderfully upholds the principle of gender justice in different areas, in different parts, like fundamental rights, like DPSPs, like fundamental duties, and like in other areas of the Constitution. So, because gender justice, you could define it, but you also can tell it's a polity question, so I'd want to broadly know in which all areas the gender justice has been discussed. So broadly, I tell the examiner the broad areas, and then I come to the main body. Following are the constitutional provisions. Following are the constitutional provisions which uphold the principles of gender justice. So rather than writing the articles randomly, I would rather build a theme. You are now trying to create broad points. This is how your answer writing will help you here in the exam. So I'd first write fundamental rights and then give examples of specific fundamental rights. For example, 14. For example, I talk about 15. For example, I talk about 16. For example, I talk about exploitations prevention under 23. Then I talk about directive principles of state policy, where I talk about Article 39, that is equal pay for equal work. Then I'll talk about Article 42, that is humane conditions for work. Then I talk about fundamental duties. If you don't remember the exact article of this DPSP, you can just broadly write down DPSP without writing the article number. It's tough to remember 39 and 42, I totally accept. But if you just write that DPSP, even then it is absolutely fine, there is no problem. The fundamental duties, you will write that to abjure the practices derogatory to women. Fundamental duties, I'd say you would need to by heart all of them. And the article is very simple, it is 51A. So you just write down abjure practices which are derogatory to women, and then we can write other provisions also. Other provisions, for example, we have got reservation for women in urban and rural local bodies. And now you can always write, though it became a reality now after your exam, you can always write that the Parliament is planning a reservation bill for women in the Lok Sabha and in the Legislative Assembly, but it is yet a bill. All of these constitutional provisions you can write down, and you can just explain one line for each of these constitutional provisions. But do write a line. It should not seem as if you are just cramming and putting forth the answers. You need to be specific. It should be well understood by the examiner. That's very important, because sometimes we just write a point and we just go ahead. This would take almost 80-90 words of your constitutional provisions. Then you need to write down that how the case laws, you can now write a connecting sentence. Even the Supreme Court has passed several judgments, not laws. Even the Supreme Court has passed several judgments in the recent times and upheld the principle of gender justice. Now the problem here is that, exact case law is quite tough to remember, because we are not students of law, we are students of polity. So if you don't remember the exact case law, some of the case laws you all know, like you all know about a very important judgment. We know about the Vishakha guidelines on sexual harassment. Everybody knows it, which led to the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Against Women Act. So you know about Vishakha guidelines, you know about the Supreme Court decision in the triple talaq case, which was held to be illegal in 2017. This is the Shaira Bino case. You also know about in 2018, the Supreme Court striking down the section on adultery in the IPC. You also know about Supreme Court in 2018 again striking down section 377 of IPC. These are the 4 case laws that anyone would remember being a good student, right? So exact case law method we don't need to write. Even if we write and we just write 2 lines here a piece, it automatically would become a good way to give a decent spread, a decent knowledge in the examination hall before the examiner. So each of these is what we remember. And then we have 2 more cases there are many cases actually, but then there are 2 more cases that we can just write down. One is 5th and 6th. In 5th case, you can write down is Article 14 was used to uphold the right to equality of women in employment in this case, which is called as the Air India case of 1981. The details of the case law, they are not important. We'll simply write Article 14 was used to uphold the right to employment of women in the Air India case. And then in this case, this is again an important case. If you remember, that's okay. Lakshmi versus Union of India 2015. Guidelines were revealed by the Supreme Court for the acid attack victims. These 6 case laws, they are more than enough for us to write in the examination hall with 2 lines apiece for each one of them. So I would expect a good student to recall 1 to 4 because these are very important. We keep on reading about them time and again. Adultery 2018, section 377. This is popularly called as Navtej Singh Johar case. The adultery case is popularly called as the Joseph Shine case. All of these case laws, they keep on coming in newspapers, but they have come in the past 2 years. So again, a bit of newspaper reading would again help us to basically get all the points at one place. And then we can just conclude about the fact that how the Constitution is balancing the natural, how the Constitution is upholding the idea of gender justice very well, which has been further given life by the Supreme Court through its classic decisions. That is what you had to write. This I'd rate would be a tough question factually because all of these provisions will not come to us instantaneously. This fundamental duty was slightly tough. Reservation you could have written. DPSPs was slightly tough. 23 was still slightly tough to write. And in these case laws, if you just write these 4, I would say that you would have done good justice to the question. So that is what we have in the case that came up in the exam as a 15 marker. Then 13th question is again a good question after I think many years. 356 has been asked twice or thrice in prelims in the present trend of examination, but now they've asked 356 for the first time in the mains in the current scheme of the exam, that is 2013 onwards. Last time they had asked a question on financial emergency as a 10 marker. That also came out of the blue. Financial emergency has not been asked before in the present trend. It was a simple 10 marker that they had asked that what's the effect of financial emergency. That ways it's again a good question that they slightly tweaked it. A bit of thought was required, but let me read the question first. It's primarily on precedence rule. We study about governors, we study about the misuse of powers by the governors, and then we also study about the classic recommendations given by Sarkaria Commission 1988. We study about Punchi Commission, and we study about the most important case law for this topic, governor as well as Article 356. That's the case law of the S.R. Bommai case 1994. That shall be the main premise. Let's go ahead with this question. It says that account for the legal and political factors. Now again, the first thing is I need to underline the keywords for this question. It is trying to ask you first the legal factors. Legal factors means, is there any law which has been made? Has the court of law given any observation? Is there any case law? Is there any judgment that is trying to restrict the powers of the government? Then second, what are the political factors? What is the politics behind the reduced frequency of use of Article 356 by the union governments since mid-90s? Mid-90s itself is a big thing, because the landmark case law for this topic, that is called as S.R. Bomai, this was brought by the Supreme Court in 1994. In that context, if I look at this question, account for the legal and political factors, simple question, slight trickiness. Now let's look at the question. Again, to repeat, it's a core question in polity, and I know a state intro. I'd simply write the intro by explaining what is Article 356. It's a very easy provision. We'd say 356, which is popularly known as Precedence Rule, is one of the emergency provisions given in Part 18, where on the report of the governor or otherwise, if the constitutional machinery fails, you need to write this term clearly. If the constitutional machinery fails, this is the keyword you need to write. If the constitutional machinery fails, then the president can proclaim his own rule in that state by dismissing the state government, popularly known as Precedence Rule. So in the first part, I would address this introduction in 30 words. Then I need to come to the theme. So when we write the theme, I would not simply say legal factors and start writing, or I'd not simply say political factors and start writing. There has to be a connecting link. That is also a big problem that we find in the answer sheets when we evaluate, that the students, they straight away jump from the intro and they come to the theme. That's okay. The theme has been very well highlighted by you, but you need to have a connecting link. These one sentence, two sentences, they are very important. They lead to a seamless integration between the body and the intro. So I'd simply write a simple statement. Write down, despite. Now see how I'm using the terms. In one line, I'm trying to use many anecdotes which will give you a completion of knowledge. I'd say that despite Dr. B.R. Ambedkar calling it a dead letter, despite Mr. B.R. Ambedkar calling it a dead letter, the provision of Article 356 has significantly misused post-independence. But since mid-90, the proclamation or the misuse has got reduced. So I told the theory of this topic. The thoughts that led to this topic were the fact that it would be rarely used as an exceptional provision. I gave this keyword, dead letter. Examiner would know that I know about the history of this article. In just one line, I've told the examiner that B.R. Ambedkar said this article is a dead letter. And then when I come to the actual point, I now write the legal and political factors also. So in first theme, I'll first write down legal factors. Legal factors is, so there's not much of legal factors that we know here. There's not much to write as a legal factor. Obviously, we cannot create legal factor. In this case, we'd say that Supreme Court in the S.R. Bomai case 1994 had reduced the scope of discretion available with the government by writing the broad observations that the Supreme Court had made. For example, you know that the satisfaction of the precedent was subject to judicial review. For example, we know that the material on the basis of which the satisfaction was based, that could be reviewed by the Supreme Court. For example, a very interesting statement, the Supreme Court had said in this case law that the only test for the governor to determine whether the government is enjoying the confidence is flow test. And also the Supreme Court had very rightly pointed out that failure of administrative machinery does not imply failure of constitutional machinery. This was a very interesting observation along with all the three. Though this judgment spoke about 10 to 12 points that we find in the books, the most important 4-5 points you would write here. And then because I want to expand, I want to substantiate S.R. Bommai more than anything else. This is actually the major reason. Even now when the presidents, if they would want to proclaim president's rule, they'd be very careful about this judgment's observation. So this is like a watershed. We can write this keyword. Thereby, S.R. Bommai case emerged as a legal watershed. Legal watershed implies that it emerged as a division. Before S.R. Bommai, after S.R. Bommai, the trend has significantly changed. You can also write post S.R. Bommai, the judiciary also exhibited judicial activism. The judiciary also exhibited judicial activism, where you can write the example of this case, which is called as Rameshwar Prasad. You can write the example of this case, Rameshwar Prasad, in 2006, where the same points were reiterated by the Supreme Court. So what was observed by the Supreme Court in S.R. Bommai, that was repeated in the S.R. Bommai case. And also we can write down in terms of legal factors, the state governments also filed immediate cases in the High Court and thereby sought a remedy. So because of S.R. Bommai emerging as a legal watershed, led to judicial activism, led to also immediate filing of petitions by the state. For example, in the case of Arunachal in 2016. For example, in the case of Uttarakhand in 2016. In all these cases, the immediate petitions were filed by the state governments that were in distress. That is why these are the legal factors. There's no depth of factors that we can open up except the S.R. Bommai. And when I talk about the other side, because the examiner wants to know separately the political factors, this is something that all of us know from our basic knowledge of post-independence consolidation. First is that there was formation of coalition governments at center, where the center had toned down the unitary character as it was forming the governments with the help of several regional parties. So regional parties thereby had also increased their influence. When regional parties increased their influence, automatically the political factors, they were now tilting in their favor significantly. And then also was the fact, the example that was set by president, you can write it as presidential activism, though presidential activism is not a proper keyword to write. You can also write down responsible exercise of power by the president. You can write this as your keyword. Presidential activism, some of the experts, they use this term. You can write presidential activism, but I'd rather write a better term, because in polity, we'd not use the keywords loosely in the exam. It's a subject that's limited by the terminology that we have to use. So I'd rather write like this, responsible exercise of power. I'll put it like this, responsible exercise of power by the president, where I can give the example now of the president, Mr. K.R. Narayanan. That's like a classic case where in 1997 and in 1998, he had sent the advice for reconsideration back to the president, back to the government, where the government was trying to proclaim president's rule in the state of UP in 1997 and in the state of Bihar in 1998. So you can use either of the two words. Newspapers, they say activism. I'd say, responsible exercise of power. And this, I think, is a brownie point. It's like a good observation. You had to think in the examination hall, because 1 and 2 can still be thought. Third was a piece of fact you'd need to know. Fourth was a good brownie point where you can write down that the cooperative federalism has emerged as an important theme in center-state relations. Cooperative federalism has emerged as an important theme post 2014, where you can give the example of how Niti Aayog, how GST, all of these are examples of the way the central government is trying to collaboratively try to pursue the objectives of the nation building. That is why this keyword, I think, would have played a very important role. It would have given you 1 mark extra, in my opinion, where you speak the fact that how the role of center, how the center itself is perceiving the states, that itself has undergone a sea of change. With this, we know these points. I gave the legal factors, I gave the political factors. Conclusion, when you write for this answer, you can say that Article 356, as observed by another commission. Now you need to write some more information. You want to tell the examiner that you know about several center state commissions and how they have given a good report. So you can always say that how Sarkaria Commission, you can write like this: Sarkaria Commission in 1988 had recommended that the Article 356 should be used by the center only as a tool of last resort, only in exceptional circumstances. If you wrote this, you would have automatically got good marks in the examination. So that is how, in 1 or 2 lines, there's no need to go beyond the scope. We need to restrict our word limit carefully. They'll cut down your marks if you go beyond the word limit. So you need to restrict yourself to, again, 10% of the word limit for the intro, 10% for the outro, for the conclusion. Remaining 80% we stick to the main body. This was again a good question. 2-3 factors, political factors, they were interesting. Otherwise, I'd again rate this question as a moderately tough question, a good question to ask in the exam.
Question number 14. Discuss the contribution of civil society organization for women's effective and meaningful participation and representation in state legislatures in India. So the question is specifically asking the role of civil society organizations in increasing women participation in India. So what are CSOs? We will define in the introduction. CSOs include NGO, SHGs, cooperatives and pressure groups. So CSO is a collective term which refers to any bodies which is not related to state, which are voluntary organizations and which are non-profit in nature. So this is how you define CSO here. Now they are also driven by common goals, common agendas and strive to bring social change in the society. So for here, the specific question, the specific social change demanded here is increasing representation of women in state legislatures. So we can say that women participation in state legislatures have been quite low in India. Even if women participate in the election process, they become mere puppet in the hands of their husbands. All decisions are mainly taken by the male counterparts. Therefore, their participation is not only low but also not effective. So in this paragraph, you are explaining that what do you mean by participation not only being low but participation also being effective. Then what is the role of CSOs? This is now body. What is the role of CSOs in increasing participation of women in state legislatures? So remember that this is a 15-marker question. That is why we are writing so many points here. So the main contribution is they generate awareness about women rights and about benefits of women becoming leaders, how they can bring a very positive social change if they become leaders. Then they have mobilized women into SHGs, which have empowered women and therefore definitely increased their participation in state legislatures. Then empowered women become confident, Now see, we can also write here that how the empowered woman has led to increased participation of women in Panchayati Raj elections, where 1/3 seats have been reserved for women. These women go further and fight elections in state legislatures. Then participation of women in PRI and state legislatures have significantly increased in Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu because of successful SHG movements in these states. Then capacity building and training of women. Train women to become leaders. This is also done by NGOs. Then research and analysis done by NGOs about women participation, like for example, PRS does a survey every year, how many women have been elected as members of state legislatures. So through research and analysis, they again generate awareness. Then NGOs have been increasing campaigning for bringing 1/3 reservation for women in parliament and state legislatures. So what is the main role? Campaigning, doing research analysis, capacity building, then mobilizing women into SHGs, leading to their participation in Panchayati Raj and further participation in state legislatures. All these points you can write here.
Explain the significance of 101 Constitutional Amendment Act. There's no need to even inform all of you what is 101 Constitutional Amendment Act, and this is broadly about the GST. All of us know very well. We've studied in economics, we've studied in polity this topic very well. We have found the current affairs being full of the fact that how the states are unhappy because they were not receiving the GST compensation on time. And then that's the only dimension that is very interesting for polity. When GST had come as an action on 1st July 2017, we had gone all praises for the government, because you can see, we had said it's a wonderful example of cooperative federalism. That is what is the second demand of this question. It says that to what extent does it reflect the accommodative spirit of the federalism, or even if I write cooperative federalism, all of these keywords, they mean the same. It's just the same dimension which is asked repeatedly, the dimension of center-state relations, the dimension of recent issues in terms of center-state relations, the dimensions that involves these keywords like fiscal federalism, like cooperative federalism, like competitive federalism, like collaborative federalism, all of them have to be prepared as a very important pillar. It is, in the lens of the subject, a static cum current affairs topic. You need to first know a bit of theory of federal issues that the nation of our country is facing. Then you need to know the current dimensions of that topic. This question, I would say, would not be a very tough question to answer, because we were all aware it's something that keeps on coming up in the newspapers every now and then. In the aftermath of COVID, when the states experienced a high fiscal burden, that is what it came up in the exam. So let's look at the question. It's again a simple question. I got to address two simple themes. First is I need to explain the significance. Like I've been saying, we need to underline the keywords. Explain the significance. First keyword, I need to do that. And second is, it says that to what extent does it reflect the accommodative spirit of federalism. That is slightly interesting, that we'll discuss in the end. Now to come to the question, first I'll introduce this question by simply saying that what is this amendment all about? There could not be an easier introduction to this question, that 101 Constitutional Amendment Act established the mechanism of goods and services tax, popularly known as GST, where for the first time center and states simultaneously got the powers to levy GST on the citizens. That is all. I just need to explain in 2-3 lines the broad intro of what is GST, and then you can just introduce the term. You can just now say that GST has been a landmark step as far as center-state fiscal relations are concerned. I want you to use these keywords in the exam. It is something that we sometimes forget to address the question, we sometimes forget to use these keywords in the exam. It's very important for us to use the technical keywords in polity, and it's a good share of questions that comes up. There are 8 questions that came up this year in prelims, in the mains, I'm sorry. So you need to basically inform this, that this is the keyword, this is the theme. This will give you an extra edge from the examiner. You say that goods and services tax has been a landmark initiative as far as center-state fiscal relations are concerned, and it is significant. And it is significant. And it is significant because of the following reasons. It is significant because of following reasons. Now that's the question. When you want to write the significance, you need to keep in mind center-state fiscal relations, and you need to keep in mind the lens of polity. This question is not asking you GST. You need to explain GST from the lens of polity. That was the art here. So I'd first say, first point is very simple. It led to the concept of one nation, one tax, right? Or you can say it led to uniformity in taxation. You'd use this phrase uniformity in taxation because several taxes that were levied by the center, you need to give examples. Like you would say about the union levying the service tax and the states levying the sales tax. Several taxes that were introduced and levied by center and state, they got amalgamated, they all got removed, and we imposed one goods and services tax. Then you would also write here as a second point that under Article 246A, which was introduced as an amendment, this is significant because center and states got the simultaneous powers to impose GST. Now this is very interesting because you are trying to give the examiner a lens of polity, that for the first time center and states, both of them have got the simultaneous powers to levy GST. And then you would say number 3, third point in significance, you would write that it led to insertion of Article 279A and thereby establishment of GST Council, which had both center and state finance ministers as members, and thereby you can say that it was a significant initiative as it introduced cooperative federalism in the taxation scheme. It introduced cooperative federalism in the taxation scheme. If you want to add 1 or 2 more points, we can obviously build upon these points. I'm just trying to give you a brief framework how with the lens of polity this question which you study in economics has to be addressed. This is what we know as the significance of GST. These keywords are very interesting. I'll again repeat the keywords: center-state fiscal relations, and then we'll go to the other side of the question where we'd say that, now what I said, I'll pick up from there. I'd say that cooperative federalism is upheld by introduction of GST in the following manner. I'm now setting the premise for the second part of the question. Cooperative federalism has been upheld by introduction of GST, or if you want to say spirit of accommodation is wonderfully manifested in GST in the following manner. These points are very much similar. First, you would say that right from the stage of the tax being introduced, right at the stage of conception, right at the state of conception of this tax, there has been consensus-based approach which has been followed by the central government, as the central government is trying to handhold the states take the states, it tried to take the states along with itself, and that is only when it was made possible that GST could become a reality. So this is the pre-taxation stage. Even before we started levying the tax, even before 1st July 2017, when GST became a reality, the center and states had handheld the states and taken the idea forward. At the level of GST now being implemented, so I'd write here separately, in the implementation stage, this is my scheme, you can have a different methodology, but this is slightly interesting. At the implementation stage of GST, I'd say that the GST Council again has taken all the decisions by consensus. The composition or the broad distribution of working is where 2/3 of the seats they are with the states, 1/3 of the seats they are with the center. So here also the states have got an upper hand, not only with respect to GST Council, but also with respect to the training of officials, that is center and state. Both the officials need to be trained for this tax, and also the awareness generation about GST. Both center and state officials have collaboratively tried to ensure that GST becomes a reality, it becomes a success. Thereby, the initial stage, the conceptualization stage of GST, the implementation of stage of GST, both of these stages have wonderfully incorporated the idea of cooperative federalism, have wonderfully incorporated the idea of the spirit of accommodation. That is why this GST as a step is a wonderful step to uphold the balance of federalism, to uphold the center-state fiscal relations, to uphold collaborative federalism between center and states. Any of these keywords you can use to just conclude this point, but you need to write the other side also. Despite upholding cooperative federalism, because I need to give the other side, I'll simply say, despite upholding cooperative federalism, several issues remain. You can discuss the issue of how GST compensation, which is to be given to the states, the payment has got delayed. You can also discuss here very simply the fact that GST Council's decisions can be taken only if 75% of the council votes in favor of that decision, because 66% are there with the states and remaining is there with the center. Thereby, in a way, the decisions can be taken only if the center agrees to any decision taken by all the states together. So we can say that the center broadly has got the powers to veto the decisions taken by the states. There's no need to write a lot about the criticism. We just want to briefly show the examiner that we know the other side of the GST, and then you can just conclude this topic that in the light of recent disputes like interstate river water disputes, like the Delhi Service Ordinance or the Delhi Service Act now, the spirit of GST and thereby upholding cooperative federalism can be inculcated by the center and state. So when you write a conclusion here, you can write any other point, but it's better that if there's any other problem that is being faced by a state or a group of states or center or states, again we can cite that how this methodology of center, where the center had taken care, handheld the states, how this methodology can be very essential and important in ensuring that, like GST in all other areas of center-state relations, center-state disputes, the issues can be resolved wonderfully by the government. So this is the entire thing that we have discussed here for GST. So broadly, this question I'd say was easy to moderate attempt. There was not much of ingenuity that we could have done. Only one bit of information that only one aspect could have segregated a good and an average student, where when you are writing the significance of GST, you don't need to give what is GST. You don't need to write which taxes have been subsumed. That details, they are not important. Examiner is just trying to know from all of us that what is the polity dimension of each of these benefits. That is why, if you can see, I'm trying to show the examiner the articles and then I am writing the sentence. Even if you have the same economic significance, but in a polity paper, I'd want the examiner to have a look at each of these articles, because when polity, articles, they form the base. So this was a discussion on GST. Just to also summarize, this dimension of center-state relations has to be prepared well. It's again, to repeat, like I always say in the classes, a slightly tricky area to compare. It's slightly tricky area to understand, where you need to read the newspapers very much broadly and try to amalgamate, try to get all of these issues together. Only then we'll be able to attempt this question. The structuring of this question was easier because there's not much to open up, because it is simply asking you two questions. You could have easily attempted the structure. So I'd say this was a easy to moderate question to attempt. Not very tough, I'd say. Explain the structure of parliamentary committee system. It talks about, first, again, just to also tell you, whenever I read the question, I need to first immediately underline the keywords so that I can save on my time when I'm writing the answers. So the first keyword here is structure of the parliamentary committee system. How far have been, now see, this is the keyword, how far the financial committees have helped in the institutionalization of the Indian Parliament. This is again a 15 marker, just to also tell you the word limit that we have is 250 words. I'll just read out the entire question again quickly. First is, explain the structure of parliamentary committee system. Second, in the same question, how far the financial committees have helped in institutionalization of the Indian Parliament. So basically 100 odd words I'll give to the first part. For second part, I'll give 100 odd words, and the remaining words I'll give for the intro and the conclusion. Again, before I start the question, for any question that is coming up in polity, the best way is to introduce the question by writing about the article which is there. So in this case, the topic or the query is about parliamentary committees. So I'll first inform the examiner in brief. I don't want to open up the introduction in great detail. That is also what we sometimes do as an error in several answer keys and several answer copies that we evaluate. We've seen that the students, they write 2-3 paras in the intro. That's absolutely not right. We have to stick to the word limit, that is 250 words. I will not take more than 30 words to start my topic. I'll simply start by saying parliamentary committees have been mentioned in the Constitution under Article 105 and under Article 88. And these parliamentary committees are committees of which members of parliament are members, and these parliamentary committees assist the parliament in performance of their function, that is passing of bills, that is detailed analysis on the budget, etc. Detailed analysis on the budget, etc. So basically I've told the examiner about parliamentary committees, the constitutional base. We always need to mention the examiner about the article from where that particular topic has been taken up. And after these 3-4 lines, let's say in 30-40 words, I've told the examiner very well that this is what a parliamentary committee is like. Now I'll come to the next part. I'll write it on the next slide. Now I'll leave a line and I'd start with a discussion on the body. And when I start the body, I need to inform about the structure. So I can simply write a statement. I can simply state that the structure of parliamentary committee is as follows. The structure of parliamentary committee is as follows. So in this case, we all know this is again a very simple question, because we read in the textbook the basic static aspect of how the parliamentary committees are organized. So I'll just say, I can just draw a diagram here. In fact, we normally have a question when to draw a table, when to draw a diagram. And since I need to write a lot of factual information in this question, so I'd rather make a simple table. I'd say parliamentary committees. I first have the first type of parliamentary committees. They are ad hoc. In bracket, I can simply write down by ad hoc, I imply they are temporary. They are formed for a particular purpose and then they are disbanded. And the second type of parliamentary committees that we have, that is called as standing. Standing is, they are permanent. And when I say permanent, I'd like to also add that they are reconstituted every year. We just need to stick to the word limit. So I'll just write the keywords in bracket. It is obviously explaining the examiner on its own. Ad hoc and standing, there's no need to write a separate line for this particular explanation. And then I'll further reclassify ad hoc parliamentary committees into the ones that we all know from the current affairs. First, we have the Joint Parliamentary Committee. Then we have Joint Committee on Bills. Joint Committee on Bills. Then we have Select Committee on Bills. And there are one or three more ad hoc committees, but there's no need to go into exact details. There is no fixed classification that is officially given by the House. The rules of the Lok Sabha and the Council of States, they merely explain us about each of these parliamentary committees. So more or less in the subject, it's like an ad hoc classification, ad hoc structure that we follow. So if you just write some of the ad hoc committees, you'd be getting your marks. When I come to my next area, that is standing committees, this is very important. So I'll slightly scroll the screen up. Standing parliamentaries, first, all of us know about department related standing committees. That is the 24 standing committees that we have. So you can just write some details in the bracket here itself to save on your words. You can write 24 in number, each having a strength of 31 members. 21 they come from the Lok Sabha, 10 they come from the Council of States. Then we'll write financial committees. This is what is being asked in the second part of the question. So I anyways will explain and write them in great detail in the second half. So I'll just write financial committees, and then I can also write the other type. We call it House committees. House committees are committees that help the parliament, that is both the houses individually, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, in the day-to-day performance of their business. So I can write some of the examples, the ones that we study in the current affairs. For example, we study about privileges committee whenever there is violation of any parliamentary privilege. We study about business advisory committee that very well plans the business for the session. It plans which motions, resolutions, discussion shall be taken up in the House. So any of the parliamentary committees that you know, just write down 2-3 examples in brackets so that the examiner knows that you have a good idea about House committees. And then we have got other parliamentary committees which are standing. In other parliamentary, again, we don't want to write the names of all the parliamentary committees because no source is giving an exhaustive classification. So you'll just write the names of some of the parliamentary committees. For example, you can write the name of Joint Committee on Salaries and Allowances of MPs. You can write about Joint Committee on Offices of Profit. And that is the problem, because I would again reiterate, no source is giving us a classification. So even if you provide this much information with slight focus on DRSCs, financial committees, some examples here, and maybe a bit of 1 or 2 odd lines in the bracket for JPC, we'd be addressing the first part of the question, that is, give us the structure. And then we go to the second part. After I've shown the structure to the examiner, then I go to the second part, that is the second part of the question. It is trying to know how the financial committees have helped in institutionalization of parliament. Institutionalization is again a very tricky word which has been given in the exam just to trap the students. But it's again very simple. Institutionalization is just implying that how the role of the parliament questioning the government, how the primary constitutional role that is given to the parliament, that's to question the government and the actions taken by itself, how this role of questioning has been facilitated, has been catalyzed by the parliamentary committees. That is what we mean by the keyword of institutionalization. So I'll simply write a statement here. I'd say that the financial committees, because I need to now inform the examiner about the financial committees. So I'll simply write a statement like this. I'd say that the financial committees are of three types. First is Public Accounts Committee. Second is Estimates Committee. And then the third is Committee on Public Undertakings. In the bracket, if you want, we can write the strength of each and every parliamentary committee to just keep it as a full fact before the examiner. Now the examiner knows the three financial committees that we have in the Indian parliamentary system. Then we'll write down the demand of the question. You'd write like this, that these financial committees play a very important role in facilitating or in institutionalization of the parliament in the following manner. So before we write the points, they are not asking you the functions of each of these three parliamentary committees together. They don't want you to know what is PSC, what is estimates, what is COPU. They want us to write the broad understanding, the broad conceptual understanding about the fact that how these financial committees, they are helping the parliament. So this now slightly requires a bit of art, where the individual points that we would have by hearted for prelims as well as mains, because I'll tell you one question comes more or less every 2-3 years in the mains or prelims from this area. So this is one of the well prepared areas that every student would prepare. So then we need to write this answer in such a manner that I give a broad overview. I give a broad point to the examiner about the broad functions which are performed by the financial committees. For example, see now, this is now where the answer writing will help you, because it is not, again to repeat, not asking us specific functions of each of these three. It is trying to know the broad functions of the financial committees. So I'll put it like this. I'd say that these financial committees help in institutionalization in the following manner. First, I'll write they play the role of financial watchdog. Underline. This is the keyword that I'm giving the examiner. Play the role of financial watchdog, and then I need to give an example how these parliamentary committees, they play the role of a watchdog. For example, all of us know that in 2021 we had celebrated the 100th year of the establishment of Public Accounts Committee. Thereby I'd simply write here that Public Accounts Committee plays the role of the watchdog as it evaluates the appropriation and finance accounts of the Government of India after the financial year ends. Thereby, what I'm trying to do is, all the points which are by hearted individually for each of these three committees, I'm now trying to put them across as one point and then give a specific example of this, any of the three, and thereby substantiate the facts. So when I say it plays the role of a watchdog, I'm giving the example of how the Public Accounts Committee specifically plays the role of a watchdog by evaluating the government finances, and thereby this report is assisting the members of the parliament in questioning the expenditure by the government. Then second, I'll also write the second role that they've played. They ensure continuous economic evaluation. Continuous economic evaluation. When I say continuous economic evaluation, I have given a generic point. I need to now substantiate by giving the example. Examples are very important in your mains. If you don't give the examples, it will not help us score better. you are substantiating your points. So I'll simply write the example of this estimates committee, where I'll say estimates committee is called as continuous economic committee, as it helps the government in trying to have efficiency in implementation of policies. It continuously suggests better methods for economic evaluation of the actions taken by the government. And then as the third point, I'll write, apart from watchdog continuous economic evaluation, I'd say that they analyze the public undertakings. We all know that the public undertakings are the government organizations which are run, overall controlled by the executive. Thereby, I'd say here that the performance of public undertakings that is essential for the economic health of a country, their performance is analyzed by the Committee on Public Undertakings, and the public undertakings which are not evaluated by COPU, they are evaluated by Public Accounts Committee. Thereby, they assist the Parliament in ensuring that a check can be made on the evaluation or analysis of public undertakings owned by the central government. By these 3 points, for 3 lines each, I'll write for each of these 3 committees broadly. We can add more points, we can add some more information, but what we want to see is these 3 are the broad functions. I've given the example on each of these 3 cases that how institutionalization of the parliament is happening. You need to show the examiner again and again. Again and again, he needs to see what he's looking for. You need to tell him that is how each of these parliamentary committees, they are helping the parliament in overall questioning and analysis of the government. And after I write this second part of my question, where I've explained the second demand, I've explained that how these financial committees, they're helping in institutionalization. Then I'll go to the final part. I'd conclude by writing the other side, where I want to also give the flip side of these parliamentary committees, the 3 financial committees. I say, however, I'll write like this, however, the parliamentary committees, especially financial committees, have the following concerns. You need to always balance the answer by giving the other side. So I'm giving the concerns now. This will give a complete overview of the working of financial committees. So we'd write like this, that these are the problems. First, we all know, everybody knows that the reports, they are only recommendatory. Officially, we say they are of persuasive value. Then I'd say that number 2, after we say it's of persuasive value, I'd say that they lack experts. The members of parliament are members of these 3 financial committees, thereby they lack the contribution of experts. Third, we say they are like a post-mortem exercise. This is again very interesting. Post-mortem we call it because the expenditure is evaluated after the money has been spent by the government of India. And then we write finally that the policy aspects of the government or the executive, are not evaluated by these financial committees. With this, if we are now left with time, you can just write a line and thereby you can just conclude that thereby the parliamentary committees are popularly referred as mini parliament, or you can just write about any point about financial committees. Conclusion always needs to be broad in scope. It should give an overarching bird's eye view of the entire topic. For example, I would write like this. I would write that thereby it can be said, despite the problems, the parliamentary committees, especially financial committees, they play the role of a mini parliament. That is how I address the introduction. I addressed the main demand of the question by showing the examiner the key themes. I broke down the themes and it becomes easier for the examiner to evaluate the question. And then finally, I'm writing down the conclusion by giving the other side. If I get time, I can just write one more line, which I just told you that the parliamentary committees, they represent the mini parliament. That is all that we have for the question. Coming to the point that this question was asked in what context. This question is again a very common area for the exam. Parliamentary committees was asked in 2021 also. They had asked you the analysis of DRSCs. We just saw these DRSCs. This is department related standing committees. The chairman of Council of States back then had expressed his disaffection towards the fact that the meetings of DRSCs, they are not happening on time and the attendance is very low. In the light of that event, it came up in the exam in 2021. So this is again a very commonly expected question from the chapter of Parliament. It was a straight question with a bit of art that was required in this area, where you had to organize your answer by giving a broad contribution of financial committees. Some of us might write individually about their role. That is not really wrong, but a better way would be to write about the broad contribution, and thereby we substantiate the contribution which has been made by each of these committees. That was the only art that could have separated a good and an average student in this question.
So next question is question number 17. Development and welfare schemes for vulnerable sections by its nature are discriminatory in its approach. Do you agree? So the introduction we can say what are the vulnerable sections in India. So these include poor, women, children, SC, ST, OBC and disabled. The government through Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment run various welfare schemes for vulnerable section. For example, for women there is NRLM, Stand Up India scheme. For SC, ST, OBC, they are given benefit of reservation. Then government runs multiple scholarship schemes for SC, STs and OBCs. Then for poor, the government runs Manrega and NRLM scheme. So the government runs various schemes for various vulnerable sections. Now the question says whether the schemes are discriminatory in nature or not. Do they create discrimination or not? The answer is yes. Schemes by nature are discriminatory in nature because they tend to create a divide between those who are taking the benefit of the scheme and those who are not able to take the benefit of the scheme. So there is always a divide. But they are also discriminatory in many other ways. For example, schemes for ST are only for those who are mentioned in central list for STs and not for tribes or forest dwellers who are non-STs. Then poverty schemes are only meant for those who are below the poverty line. So what about those people who are around the poverty line? They feel discriminated. Similarly, schemes for disabled are only meant for those who are benchmark disabled. That is, at least they are 40% disabled. What about those people who are 39% disabled? They are excluded from the benefit of reservation and other welfare schemes. Then many poverty alleviation schemes like NRLM, where women are mobilized into SHGs, give preference to create women SHG groups only, but poverty is suffered by both males and females equally. So males here feel discriminated. Then some schemes like Stand Up India is only for SC, ST women entrepreneurs. Why not OBC entrepreneurs? They also face multiple challenges in starting their own business. So yes, in a way, various welfare schemes are discriminatory in nature. However, we can also say that in the conclusion, that welfare schemes are discriminatory in nature, but one has to understand that government needs to draw a line to identify the beneficiaries. There is no way out in which the government cannot discriminate one over the other. The government will have to draw a line somewhere because the government cannot run schemes for all. The government has limited resources and it cannot run schemes for all. So therefore, the schemes by their nature will be discriminatory in nature. You can write this point in the conclusion. Next question, question number 18. Again, 15 marker. Skill development program have succeeded in increasing human resource supply to various sectors. In this context, analyze the linkage between education, skill and employment. This question is also very easy. In the introduction, you can talk about skill development is essential in supply of human resource to sectors especially like manufacturing and service. Skill development is essential especially for the growth of manufacturing sector in India. In India, you can't have manufacturing sector without the supply of skilled labor. Now you have to identify the link between education, skill and employment. So what is the link? Education serves as foundation. Education serves as foundation means education increase the cognitive abilities of the child, because 80% of the brain development happens when the child is in the age group of 0 to 6 years. So we have to focus on early childhood care and education. Next, if the child has very good cognitive skills, if the child is having very good cognitive skills, he will have the potential to learn high level skills, end up creating him ready for the employment in high skilled formal sector. So what we have to say, that if the foundation would be strong, cognitive abilities would be strong. If the foundation would be weak, cognitive abilities would be weak. If the cognitive abilities would be strong, skill development would be strong, the child will be able to learn high level skills and therefore get very good employment opportunities. If the child has poor cognitive abilities, skill development will be low. If the skill development will be low, he will continue to struggle in low level, low paying jobs. So there is essentially a link between employment, skill and education. So what school has to do? School has to impart vocational education to the child and develop cognitive abilities. Skill development to be done through ITI and polytechnic institutions, and they should train students in those skills which are required by industries. If they will train students in those skills which are required by industries, there will be immediate employment opportunities in the industries. So what in the conclusion we can say, there has to be effective coordination between skill development, between education, skill development and employment. Any weak link in the three, any weak link will destroy our demographic dividend. So you can write about these points in your answer. Very simple question.
The expansion and strengthening of NATO and a stronger US-Europe strategic partnership works well for India. It's not well, works well for India. And what is your opinion about this statement? Give reasons and examples to support your answer. It is a 15 marks question. Okay. So the keywords again here is expansion and strengthening of NATO and a stronger US-Europe strategic partnership. Now you have to understand that, you have to understand the context behind this question. Okay. And the context was several developments in the first 6 months of this year. A US Select Committee, that is Select Committee of US Congress, it recommended in its report that India should be included as a member of NATO Plus. Now this NATO Plus, it's not an official term, it's unofficial term which includes NATO's partners. 4 are in Indo-Pacific and 1 is Israel. The Indo-Pacific partners are Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and 5th is Israel. So how the NATO plus, India should be included into NATO plus, and this is to counter China's threat. Okay. Secondly, we can say even before that, the US ambassador to NATO, he remarked that US and NATO are willing to cooperate with India, and it depends on India. And one of the co-chair of Indian caucus in Senate, he also declared his intention to bring a law in US Congress that how it will try to include India in the NATO plus. So it was in this context this question was asked. And second context was how the Russia-Ukraine war, which has dragged on for 19 months and there is no end in sight, how Russia-Ukraine war has led to increased cooperation between US and its European partners. Remember, President Trump's policy was that Europe should be responsible for its own security, and European countries should able to match the 2% target of the GDP as far as the defense spending is concerned. But when Joe Biden came, assured the US allies that US is there to with them, and this Russia's war in Ukraine, it has reinvigorated US ties with his European allies. So it's a US-led West despite its internal differentiation. That's how it's taking on the emerging axis of Russia and China. And many commentators have also said that it's like a new Cold War brewing between these two blocs. So it is in that context, this was expanding stronger US-Europe strategic partnership with the Russian invasion of Ukraine in mind. This question was asked. Okay. And it says, what is your opinion about this statement, and give reasons and examples to support your answer. So first you have to emphasize on what is your opinion about this development, at how it works well for India, and whatever you are saying, you have to substantiate it with reasons first as well as examples. So it is like, what UPSC has a question, illustrate it with suitable examples. So you have to give reasons as well as illustrate examples for that. Now in introduction, you could have written about, obviously, international cooperation and mutual understanding are key pillars of international relations for every country. And one of the aims is to do what you can do to promote international security and international stability. Now, New Delhi understands in very clear and unambiguous terms that it needs US and the West for its growth and development. And one of the trigger factor is how it is said, the strategic impatience of Chinese President Xi. Okay. So how that is the background, and if you see the context that that's for explanation purpose, there's no need to write in the examination in detail. And here, as I said, the US permanent representatives talked about NATO is open to more engagement with India, the recommendation of a US Select Committee that I said, and how on the eve of Prime Minister's visit, the Senate India Caucus co-chair Mark Warner had termed. And obviously I had also said that no. Now this is an important part which you need to understand, that India's outreach to the Europe has increased in recent times. This year, if I say, Prime Minister of India hosted German Chancellor, he hosted Italian Prime Minister in Delhi. He also went to France to commemorate the 25th anniversary of strategic partnership with France, and he also made a trip to Greece. Okay, so India's engagement with Europe is also there, and you have to understand that how the outcomes in the Ukraine war will have profound consequences for European security. So there is an interconnection between European and Asian theatres. That was the context. In fact, it is said that had Russia been successful in its plans as far as Ukraine are concerned, that would have emboldened China to make similar moves on Taiwan, and that would have come with a grave security implications for India. You can see Arunachal, China's irredentist claim. China claims Arunachal Pradesh as South Tibet. Okay, so obviously there is an interconnection between European as well as Asian theatres. That was the context on which question was asked. Now you have to give opinion, substantiate it with reasons and examples. So let us see, while giving the reasons, you have to focus that how this NATO expansion, Finland was added as the 31st member of NATO in April this year, and US-Europe strategic partnership, the G7 meet, and you can see in the recent the G20 summit also. that there was a division as far as G7 and the Russia-China camp was concerned over the consensus document. Okay, so while answering this question, you have to keep in mind that yes, there are certain positive impact for India as far as this US-EU strategic partnership and NATO expansion is concerned, but at the same time, you have to also highlight the concerns, that how it has concerns with respect to India's ties with Russia, China, regional partners, like if I say talk about West Asia, Iran as well as Turkey. Okay, so positive as well as some concerns you have to keep in mind, and you have to explain it with examples also. Coming on to the first discuss positive aspects. Okay, now India's response was that India, as the foreign minister had said, that is NATO template does not apply to India. Okay, now moving on to what the positive impact is. And the positive impact of this growing closeness of US and EU can be understood by first examining that there has to be strategic convergence of interest between US-Europe strategic partnership and what India expects from this as far as India is concerned. So obviously there is a strategic convergence, and one element of strategic convergence is that obviously the shared democratic values. Now this is important. In fact, the US-European camp consists of democracy. India is also the world's largest democracy. So what binds them together is shared democratic values, and as the saying goes, birds of same feather flock together. So they have a common interest, and this common interest, especially if you keep Indo-Pacific region in mind. So the common interests are obviously the rule-based order, free and open Indo-Pacific, freedom of navigation and overflight. So this shared democratic values could help foster mutual trust and promote shared strategic interest, such as maintaining regional stability and combating terrorism. So obviously this is one positive aspect for India. Second is you have to consider that India has stake in stability and prosperity of Europe. And in fact, if I consider region-wise, European Union is the second, you can say Europe is the second largest trading partner of India and second largest export market. Here when I'm talking about, it is region wise. Okay, so obviously what happens in Europe has serious implications for India, economic security, and this US-Europe strategic partnership and NATO expansion, it boosts stability in this European theater, which augurs well for India. So stability is important, and that's how you can see that this is how Europe is a major trade and investment partner, a source of technology and innovation, and that's how EU strategic partnership and NATO expansion helps in strengthening stability and prosperity of Europe, which obviously augurs good for India. Second point. Now, third point is obviously this partnership from security angle. This partnership helps in countering traditional as well as non-traditional security threats. And for example, this safeguard of the sea lines of communication, that is combating piracy, IUUF, illegal, unreported, and if you say illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, IUUF, which Chinese are accused of. Chinese fishing militia in the South China Sea. They have been doing that. So obviously countering traditional as well non-traditional security threats, and this can help India in modernizing its defense industrial base, counter terrorism, promote maritime security, space cooperation. I've included Artemis Accords. Artemis Accord obviously is a non-binding agreement which India also signed with America along with other European partners that how it aims at its space exploration. So obviously there's a convergence of interest and how this partnership helps in boosting India's efforts in countering traditional as well as non-traditional security threats. And so this is as far as the theater of Europe is concerned. Now, in the Indo-Pacific, obviously, China is an important factor, and that's where the convergence of interest also comes in. No, this NATO plus, which includes many Quad countries, or for example, AUKUS, the grouping of Australia, US, and UK. So here we find that this obviously this US strategic partnership would act as a deterrence against potential Chinese threats in the region. And secondly, as per the New Washington Consensus. Now, this New Washington Consensus was a term given by Jake Sullivan. That was against the Washington Consensus, which US believed had benefited China more than US, especially in the critical sectors like semiconductors. So obviously, US has been through New Washington Consensus, it wants to develop resilient supply chains with the help of its partners, friendshoring it is called, and that also aligns with EU's what is called as de-risking their economies on China. So from decoupling, Europe has now shifted to de-risking. So both New Washington Consensus of US and de-risking policy of Europe will work in favor of India economically, where India can become a destination for manufacturing of the European companies, American companies, and India can be an important player in the global supply chain. In fact, Indian government semiconductor policy aims at that, boosting semiconductor manufacturing in India. So how this New Washington Consensus and European de-risking, that how India's is a welcome step for India, and this will make India an alternative base for supply chains. That is a second economic benefit which India expects to get from that. And here we find that further discussions with these groups will encompass emerging areas of collaboration. Now, as far as BRI is concerned, now India has obviously problems with the BRI. India has rejected BRI as a debt trap policy, and so also US, EU members in particular, they are aware of this Chinese influence, how BRI has expanded Chinese influence. So as a counter to that, recently initiative was IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. So obviously that's where a convergence of interest, and this boosts India's connectivity with the West, especially Europe and West Asian countries in mind. So obviously that augurs well for India, and they can collaborate in climate change, cybersecurity, science and technology, etc. And significant moves in this direction will boost India's comprehensive national power and help Delhi stabilize the balance of power in Asia. And that in turn should reduce the burden on Europe and US to contribute directly to Asian security. So obviously that's how the convergence of interest of this US-Europe strategic partnership and India, obviously it will end up in making India's defense capabilities more, and in fact US and France, two major countries, are also helping India in upgrading its defense capacities. So that will obviously ensure that India becomes an important player in the Asian theater, which matches India's aspirations, and that obviously will reduce the burden on Europe and EU to contribute directly to Asian security, because India is there to shoulder the responsibilities. So these are as far as positive benefits for India is concerned. But coming to the concerns, and here I told you the concerns with respect to India's relationship with Russia, China, as well as regional heavyweights like Iran. All these three countries have a troubled ties with the West. So how that will put a strain on India's strategic autonomy. Okay. So here we find that, as I said, it needs to be assessed in the larger context of India's strategic autonomy. And this increased US-Europe strategic partnership will annoy Russia and China. It is said that it will lead to an increased militarization of a provoked China, which will complicate India's security. Especially China is ramping up military pressure along the line of actual control. In fact, many experts have pointed out that Chinese activities in Eastern Ladakh since May 2020 was one of the reason was to give India a stern message that how your growing closeness with Quad countries obviously is one important factor, and in fact India is the only Quad country which has border with China. So obviously that may trigger China, and we have seen that China's aggressive behavior with respect to Taiwan, and that may spill over to India's actions in China's actions vis-a-vis India, especially in Arunachal. And here you find that Iran, obviously that will increase problem with Iran, and India has to keep in mind that its ties with Russia. India has so far not condemned Russian invasion of Ukraine, and India has called for diplomatic solution. But this increased partnership of US and EU, which threatened to isolate Russia internationally. India has not supported their bilateral sanctions on Russia. India has kept buying oil and fertilizers from Russia. But this is how India has to juggle between the competing American and West demands versus its safeguarding its strategic ties with Russia. So Indian diplomacy has so far done a commendable job in that regard, but this will increase further strain on India's strategic autonomy. So India has to protect its what India calls special and privileged strategic partnership with Russia. With building of the US-Europe strategic partnership and expansion of NATO, that will come under strain. In fact, as all of you are aware, that one of the very reasons why Russia had invaded Ukraine was not allowing expansion of NATO by including Ukraine as a member of NATO. And obviously, India's priorities lies in addressing its own regional dynamics, and with the US and NATO increasing their activity, that may have forced India to divert its resources and attention away from these pressing issues, and therefore will not be much of help to India. So that will lead to diversion of the resources to meet these challenges, and that will weaken India's attempt to tackle those issues which impinge on its security directly. So as I've said, positive as well as negative. And in conclusion, you can again mention that India's strategic autonomy or multi-alignment policy, that ultimately India has been taking its policy keeping in mind its national interest, and that's what will expected to guide India's response to the fast changing dynamics between Western bloc as well as Russia-China bloc, and that we have seen in the G20 communique, where India was able to bring both the G7 countries and these parties on board for a consensus declaration at G20, and many have said that this was a diplomatic achievement for India. So that way you can conclude in that, mention as a conclusion, keeping in mind that what will be the guiding principles of India's response as far as these two competing blocs are concerned. So with this we discuss this part, and coming to the last question. Now this is again UPSC has asked question on specialized agencies of UN, and specialized agencies of UN, like UPSC has asked question related to MacBride Commission in UNESCO. ECOSOC questions have also been asked, and this time UPSC has asked question on IMO, International Maritime Organization. So this you have to keep in mind that certain developments which ensure that which can in fact give you a hint that which all UNESCO or which all specialized agencies are important for this years. And here, for example, in 2020 paper, UPSC had asked question related to WHO, because that WHO's role was important in that context. And here, with global warming and climate change, especially China's actions in South China Sea, assertive actions. Now 10 dash line. China has released a new maps which say that 90% of its South China Sea is Chinese. So how it has emphasized the concept of global commons, okay, and add it with global warming and climate change. That how it becomes a question, especially with related to high sea. And in this question we find the context is given. Sea is an important component of the cosmos. We can say global commons. And discuss in light of the above statement the role of IMO in protecting environment and enhancing maritime safety and security. So you have to focus on two roles of IMO, International Maritime Organization, where first you have to focus on what steps IMO has taken to protect environment and what steps is there to ensure maritime security and safety. Now in introduction, you can straight away give some background of the IMO. And here International Maritime Organization is a UN specialized agency with responsibility for safety and security of shipping. And it was established by means of a convention. And IMO's work supports the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now this line, it gives you a clear linkage to what the two UPSC is asking you. Protecting environment and maritime safety and security. Because obviously they are important for our Sustainable Development Goals. Moving on to the discussion of first, protecting environment. And you can see there are various areas where IMO has taken initiatives. For example, protecting the marine environment and how IMO has taken steps to tackle the invasive aquatic species. Since all of you have ecology and environment, you are aware with the invasive aquatic species which threaten the local ecosystem. Dumping of the waste at sea which increases sea pollution, and how it builds partnership with the civil society and private sector also to boost these goals. And tackling fouling. Now fouling is the accumulation of various aquatic organisms on ship's hull and how they affect the maritime biodiversity, coastal properties and infrastructure, including ocean resources, and how this global fouling partnership of IMO, it helps in tackling the problems of this biofouling. IMO has also given special protection status of particularly sensitive sea area. That how it is to ensure the protection of the vulnerable species. And this is similar to what we see in our forests also. That certain areas needs to be avoided as far as development purpose is concerned. The debate between go zone and no go zone that you are aware of. So in a similar way, by declaring certain areas as particularly sensitive areas, how IMO works to ensure that international shipping does not passes through that area which cause a ecological damage to that area. And in the context of global warming and climate change, this IMO has made energy efficient shipping as its integral part of IMO to achieve greener shipping practices. And from 1st January this year, it is mandatory for all ships to calculate their attained energy efficiency existing ship index. That is to measure the energy efficiency. IMO has also worked to decarbonize the shipping, and how this is aim is to eradicate greenhouse gas emissions from shipping entirely. So these few steps you can prioritize by suggesting what IMO has done as far as protecting environment is concerned. Coming to the second part, it talks about enhancing maritime safety and security. Now in this enhancing maritime safety and security, you find that IMO has taken a number of steps. For example, it has set up a maritime safety committee, and this committee has shaped the way international shipping operates. For example, codes, conventions and guidelines to touch upon every aspect of life at sea. For example, giving standards for shipbuilding, in fact, ship dismantling also. There is a port in Gujarat that is called as Alang Port in Gujarat. Now that is, a major port for shipbreaking across the world, and how shipbreaking, for example, it contains certain toxic metals, for example, materials like asbestos, which impact the health of the workers as well as they pollute the local environment in Alang. So how IMO has given the standards for that, and IMO has been addressing the problems of maritime piracy, especially in the off coast of Somalia. Somali pirates were notorious for as a threat to sea lanes of communication, and how IMO has worked to have this Djibouti Code of Conduct. And this Djibouti Code of Conduct was adopted in 2009, and it is based on the 4 pillars of training capacity building and legal and information sharing to counter piracy. This code was expanded in 2017 to include organized crime in maritime sector, which include human trafficking, illegal, unreported and IUUF, which I mentioned earlier, illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. And as a result of IMO, 2021, there were 0 reports of piracy of the coast of Somalia. So IMO by its Djibouti Code, it coordinated the international activity to tackle the growing menace of piracy emerging from Somalia. And this IMO was also involved in legal matters including liability and compensation issues. You are aware with the Italian Marines case. Okay, so how IMO guidelines try to resolve such confusions. And cybersecurity in shipping. Now, cybersecurity in shipping, it's an important initiative of IMO. How IMO guidelines on maritime cyber risk management. It has provided high-level recommendations to mitigate against current and emerging cyber threats. And that's how IMO has tried to ensure that safety and security at sea is taken care of. So, in conclusion, you can say, you can link it with global warming and climate change, that, IMO has worked to tackle the traditional as well as non-traditional threats to security. IMO has played an important role, and with global warming and climate change, its role will become more important, especially in tackling the marine pollution done by the ships. And that's how IMO work will be an important. So this way I have discussed 4 questions. As I said earlier, 2 questions came from dynamic section, the question on SEO as well as the question on US-Europe strategic partnership and its implications for India. And 2 questions came on static part, where the question related to diaspora and this question related to specialized agencies of UN, that is IMO. So with this, I hope this discussion was useful for you to understand what UPSC expected from you. And as I say, ultimately, the key is addressing the demand of the question. So once you understand the demand of the question, the rest of the task is easier, right? Giving a proper structure to the answer, introduction, main body and conclusion. Thank you.